Chapter 1250. The Demon Bear King was enraged when he heard the Blood Fiend Master's words. He didn't even bother to speak and just threw a punch in the direction of the Blood Fiend Master. The method used for this attack was slightly different from the method used to break through the void just now. Although it was still soundless, it had an additional sense of violence. With this punch, the space around Master Blood Fiend formed a fist mark that compressed Master Blood Fiend like crazy. Master Blood Fiend smiled coldly. He didn't do anything, but a blood dragon came out of his body. With a slight tremble, it destroyed the fist mark. Then a violent killing intent shot up into the sky. The clouds in the sky were pushed away, and the surrounding space was dyed the color of blood. Of course, this blood-red void made way for the dozen Class 8 pseudo-holiness masters in the void. Moreover, it was very orderly, without any irregularities. As a result, the dozen or so Class 8 pseudo-sages were like invisible spheres. You actually dared to make a move. Looks like if I don't teach you a lesson, you'll think that you're invincible just because you have a powerful backer. The Blood Fiend Master smiled coldly. The blood dragon shook slightly and the layer of laws fluctuated. The blood dragon had already crossed a considerable distance and appeared directly above the Demon Bear King's head. Its blood-red claws reached for the Demon Bear King's head. This claw was so mysterious that it was indescribably strange. It even made people suspect that this claw could split the heavens and earth and cut through all obstacles. The Demon Bear King's expression changed slightly when he saw this claw. He shrugged. From his body, a giant finger shot out from his back, as if it didn't need any time to do so. As soon as it appeared, it pierced into the blood dragon's head. With another jolt, the blood dragon, which had destroyed the fist imprint with ease and could even give others the feeling that it could split the heavens and earth apart with a casual claw strike, was completely shattered. It turned into countless fragments of blood light that scattered in all directions and eventually disappeared without a trace. Such a technique. The expressions of the Class 8 pseudo-holiness masters changed slightly. They looked at the Demon Bear King with fear in their eyes. Master Blood Fiend's expression changed drastically. There seemed to be pain in his heart, as well as some resentment. After a long while, he let out a long breath and said, "You're good, I admit defeat this time." He couldn't be bothered to waste any more time here. He turned around and took a step forward. As the rules and laws vibrated, he disappeared without a trace. The Bear Demon King didn't stop Master Blood Fiend from leaving. After the finger shattered the blood dragon, it floated above his head and slowly floated up and down. Just in time. There's one less competitor. Since the Bear Demon King has chased one away, then the matter of you damaging the seed of power won't be considered in the distribution later. The 12 or 13-year-old boy was the calmest person among the crowd, but he spoke indifferently at this time. I suddenly realized that one power seed isn't enough. Why don't you leave it with me first, and we'll find a chance to make it up to you in the future? The Bear Demon King chuckled. He said so. It was obvious that he wanted to keep the power seed for himself. Hearing this, everyone's expression changed, but no one spoke. They all looked at the Bear Demon King with a strange expression, as if they were looking at an idiot. "I really don't know how you became a level 8 pseudo-sage," the 12 or 13-year-old boy said indifferently. The 12 to 13-year-old kid said faintly, "To think that a mere grade 9 pseudo-sage finger made you so arrogant. Looks like you're not convinced. Since that's the case, let's fight," the Bear Demon King said indifferently. "Forget it, I originally wanted to teach you a lesson, but since you used a level 9 pseudo-sage finger to snatch a level 9 pseudo-sage seed of power, I'll give it to you." The 12 or 13-year-old boy paused for a moment, as if he wanted to attack, but he felt that it wasn't worth it. After saying that, he turned around and took a step forward. Just like the Blood Fiend Master, he disappeared without a trace. Even the other level 8 pseudo-sage couldn't catch him. In the blink of an eye, he had completely left their perception. The Bear Demon King's expression turned ugly when he heard what the 12 or 13-year-old boy said. Those words were clearly saying that he was begging for food with a golden bowl. This was not a nice thing to say. However, although he had a level 9 pseudo-sage finger and could unleash an unimaginable attack that could even threaten the lives of everyone present, he was still limited by his own strength. However, this was because his own strength was limited, and he could not unleash the full power of this finger. Under such circumstances, he didn't have much confidence in the 12 or 13-year-old boy. If the child really wanted to attack, he didn't even have a 60% chance of winning. Fortunately, he won the bet. Although the child used words to stab him in the end, he still didn't think that it was worth fighting him for such a power seed. Hence, he gave up. The child had already given up. Everyone present was at most at the same level as the Blood Fiend Master. With the help of the level 9 pseudo-sage finger, he had at least an 80% chance of winning. Under such circumstances, he became even more confident. His expression became even more arrogant as he quietly looked at the other dozen people and said, "What do you all think?" The other dozen or so level 8 pseudo-sages were not as strong as the 12 or 13-year-old boy. Seeing that the person had left, they didn't want to waste any more time with the Bear Demon King. Some didn't say a word, while others snorted coldly and turned around to leave. In the blink of an eye, only the Bear Demon King was left floating in the void, looking at the stalk of grass in the distance. After everyone left, the Demon Bear King laughed heartily. He raised his hand and grabbed at the void. The stalk of grass that seemed to be fixed in the void directly flew toward him and landed in the palm of his hand in the blink of an eye. After grabbing the stalk of grass, the Bear Demon King had a look of satisfaction on his face. As expected, this is Lu Xun's power seed. This seed is extremely compatible with my cultivation. If I can comprehend Lu Xun's cultivation path from it, it will definitely allow me to improve greatly. The few of them thought that I didn't think it through and attacked the power seed. They didn't know that I was testing the characteristics of this seed. As the Bear Demon King grabbed the stalk of grass, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. An inexplicable look of satisfaction appeared on his face. After carefully sealing the stalk of grass and putting it into his body, the Bear Demon King heaved a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to put the finger back into his body, his expression suddenly changed. "Who is it? Why aren't you willing to come out?" As he spoke, he cast his gaze somewhere in the void. "So it's fellow Bear Demon King. The two of us didn't mean to spy on you. Please forgive us." At this moment, two figures appeared where the Bear Demon King was looking. "So it's fellow Taoists Jing Ruzi and Yi Ruzi. If the two of you want to know something, you can just show yourself. There's no need to hide. If I hadn't asked just now, wouldn't this be a meaningless battle?" The Bear Demon King said indifferently. One of the two figures looked middle-aged, while the other looked young. Both of them were dressed in white robes, and both of them were quite handsome and charming. Their bodies emanated an aura that was on par with the Bear Demon King's. It was clear that both of them were powerful cultivators who weren't much weaker than the Bear Demon King. In other words, they were both level 8 pseudo-sanctuary existences. The two of us didn't think things through," the middle-aged man, Jing Ruzi, said. "Although it's a bit excessive. However, we are fellow Taoists. I still hope that you can hand over the power seed in your hand," Yi Ruzi, who looked like a young female goat, said indifferently. As he spoke, an extremely arrogant aura surged into the sky. It was as if his words were an order, and the Bear Demon King had to listen even if he didn't want to. The Bear Demon King frowned and said indifferently, "There's no need to discuss this. This power seed is extremely important to me. I can't hand it over to you two. I've long heard that the level 8 pseudo-sanctuary Bear Demon King was extremely lucky and caught the eye of a level 9 venerable. They became cultivation partners. We didn't really believe it at first, but it seems to be true now," Jing Ruzi said with a calm expression. These words made the Bear Demon King's face show a hint of anger. He said, "Either attack or scram. What's with all this nonsense?" As expected, what the child prodigy said was true. You've become too arrogant because of this. For the sake of your cultivation path, the two of us have to wake you up. I believe that your cultivation partner won't blame us, Iruzi said. As he spoke, he shook slightly, and a four-legged square cauldron drilled out of his head. A violent aura spread in all directions, instantly suppressing the void within a radius of tens of thousands of miles. This caused the law layer, time, space, matter, and energy within a radius of tens of thousands of miles to undergo subtle changes. It was as if everything had become a part of the four-legged square cauldron. So what if you're the disciple of the sovereign? You're only level 8 pseudo-sanctuary existences. Don't make it sound like you're the disciple of a sage. There are 54 sages in this world, so what do you lot amount to? You want to teach me a lesson? Today, I'll let you know that just because you're a level 9 venerable as your master doesn't mean you're the orthodox of the world. The Bear Demon King shouted angrily. As he spoke, the finger above his head trembled slightly. A huge illusory finger appeared out of thin air above the four-legged square cauldron and pressed down on it. We're naturally not the true orthodox of the world, but we're more orthodox than you, Iruzi shouted. As he spoke, the four-legged square cauldron didn't release any other power. Instead, it directly collided with the huge illusory finger. Crack! A deafening sound rang out from the collision, and the law layer instantly shook violently. It looked as though a huge hand was picking up a bit of the law layer. The law layer started to violently tremble, and ripples of law layer started to spread out in all directions from the point of collision. This was the demon realm. The layer of laws and the great Tao had fused together, so the changes in the layer of laws would produce an even larger and more shocking phenomenon. At this moment, the phenomenon caused by the ripples in the layer of laws was even more shocking and obvious. It seemed like the world had become extremely chaotic in an instant. It was as if the space-time within a radius of tens of thousands of miles had been stuffed in by countless spacetimes in an instant and then crazily changed. This scene was very strange and bizarre. It was naturally much worse than the battlefield left behind by the battle between the sovereign and the so-called sovereign Lu. However, it had reached a level that was almost beyond the imagination of ordinary living beings. Have you all given up now? At this moment, the Bear Demon King's voice suddenly spread through the void within a radius of tens of thousands of miles. Following this voice, the ripples in the layer of laws seemed to be comforted by a powerful force, and gradually calmed down. The many phenomena caused by the violent fluctuations in the layer of laws and the huge ripples also gradually disappeared during this process, as if they had never appeared. The four-legged square cauldron quietly floated above Iruzi's head. The illusory finger had already disappeared without a trace. On the surface, it seemed like the four-legged square cauldron had the upper hand and won, but that was only what it looked like on the surface. If one looked closely, they would discover that Iruzi's face was rather pale after receiving the finger. The aura within his body was released and then retracted. It was clear that he had suffered a huge impact, but he wasn't completely unharmed. As for the Bear Demon King in the distance, it was as if nothing had happened. The finger that was floating above his head seemed to be unaffected. The finger floating above his head didn't change at all. It was obvious who was stronger and who was weaker. The Bear Demon King had no choice but to say such a thing. I didn't expect it to be a real finger. It seems that the 9th level venerable is truly devoted to you. Jing Ruzi's eyes shone with an indescribable light as she spoke. It seems. I won't be able to deal with you by myself for the time being. Since that's the case, let's just forget about this matter. You have the strength to preserve that bit of power seed, Iruzi said. Don't make it sound like it's your charity. If you don't agree, we can continue at any time, the Bear Demon King said lightly. This time it was our fault. Please forgive us. Jing Ruzi bowed very straightforwardly. However, one could only guess how much sincerity he had in his words from his quick change in attitude. Although the Bear Demon King could tell that Jing Ruzi did not have much sincerity in her words, he did not have much confidence in defeating the two of them in a real battle, even though he had relied on his finger to suppress Ruzi. Seriously speaking, the strength of both sides was equal. Under such circumstances, now that there was a way out, he could only go with the flow. He clearly knew that if he forced Jing Ruzi and the others to sincerely apologize, they would definitely fall out with him in the end. The final result was not something he was willing to bear. As such, he only snorted coldly and said, "Let's forget about this matter. Goodbye." With that, he could not be bothered with the two of them anymore. He turned around, lifted his foot, and instantly disappeared without a trace. Seeing the Bear Demon King leave, Ruzi said with a rather unsightly expression, "I didn't think that a 9th-level venerable would really cut off a finger from his true body and give it to a mere 8th-level false saint cultivation partner. There's no need to say anything about a 9th-level venerable. Master's injuries have yet to recover. Although there's some hope for him to recover, he's still unable to protect us. If we infuriate a 9th-level venerable, both of us will suffer greatly," Jing Ruzi said indifferently. "Yes, I understand," Ruzi said fearfully. Evidently, he had heard Jing Ruzi's words. Previously, the aura of the power of Master's magic treasure was emitted. "I thought it was a disciple cultivating here. Now that it's clearly not the case, we must find him as soon as possible and take back Master's inheritance," Jing Ruzi said as he looked around. "That should be the case. This person used the power of a magic treasure to lure Lu Xun's disciple over. There was clearly an intense battle. Moreover, Lu Xun's disciple must have suffered greatly in the end. Otherwise, he wouldn't have left the seed of Lu Xun's power here and lured us over just because he was indignant. Lu Xun's disciple must have dared to lure us over because he thought that we would harm that person if we knew about it. Therefore, it is impossible for him to be a disciple recognized by Master. It's very likely that he used some despicable means to obtain Master's inheritance. At the very least, he obtained a fragment of Master's magic treasure. We can't allow him to exist," Ruzi said coldly. Jing Ruzi nodded, agreeing with Ruzi's guess. The two of them searched extremely carefully in the void. It was clear that this place had undergone a drastic change. There were countless traces of power, as well as the remnants of countless laws and laws. With the power of the two grade 8 pseudo-saints, they were able to easily distinguish the various details and find the traces they were looking for. The traces of the cultivator, who had used the power of the heavenly cauldron. After a while, Jing Ruzi revealed a faint smile. She raised her hand and patted the void. "Found it." Hearing that, Ruzi stopped searching and looked in the direction of Jing Ruzi's hand. He saw that it was in the void, not far from where the seat of power was originally located. Following Jing Ruzi's slap, there was no change in the space, but there was an extremely subtle distortion in time. Chapter 1251. This person's shadow was not a real body. Instead, it was a silhouette drawn out by illusory lines. It looked extremely abstract and illusory. Moreover, the entire silhouette was extremely crude. Its edges were rather blurry. The only thing that could be clearly seen was a trace of energy flowing through the silhouette's body. It came out from the right sleeve and entered the silhouette's body. Then, it made a full circle inside the silhouette's body. Finally, it outlined the silhouette. This was the same as when Luo Fan had used the Heavenly Divine Cauldron's power to refine the Buddhist Supreme's magic treasure fragment. The Heavenly Divine Cauldron's power had circulated through his body. Clearly, Jing Ruzi was currently tracing back the way the two of them had sensed the power. She wanted to follow this direction to find traces of the existence of the person who had caused the seed of power to appear. The silhouette constantly flickered. At first, it was completely illusory and gradually became real. However, when the degree of realism reached a certain level, the silhouette began to become illusory again. Finally, it unknowingly became a shadow again. It seemed illusory yet real, and seemed to exist yet not exist. Jing-Ru-Zi and Yi-Ru-Zi's expressions changed slightly when they saw this scene. After a long while, Jing-Ru-Zi finally dispersed her ability. The silhouette gradually collapsed and disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared. Jing-Ru-Zi frowned and said, "This person is too cautious. He actually completely hides all traces of his existence at all times. It is difficult to catch him." "So it is like this. What should we do?" Yi-Ru-Zi asked with a frown. "Although this person is cautious, his curiosity is too strong. However, he was too curious after all. Just now, in order to spy on everything that had happened here, his will had left a trace here. Although it was vague, it pointed to a place outside the realm. I didn't want to go through so much trouble, but it looks like I can only do this now," Jing-Ru-Zi said. When Yi-Ru-Zi heard this, he understood what Jing-Ru-Zi meant. He nodded, and an indescribable light flashed through his eyes. They looked like two sparkling and translucent glasses. They looked extremely mysterious. Extremely mysterious. After his eyes changed like this, the surrounding laws seemed to change subtly. The surrounding law layer seemed to undergo a subtle change, as though it was simultaneously affected by the light from the pair of eyes, constantly changing. Although Jing-Ru-Zi did not have such an obvious change, the power in her body fluctuated slightly. A powerful aura emanated from his body. Although they were only strands, but because of its extremely high nature. However, it caused the surrounding space to undergo an extremely obvious change, causing the boundless origin chi in the surroundings to naturally produce a strange ripple, and all sorts of special origin chi phenomena naturally appeared. It looked as if an extremely chaotic wave had appeared out of nowhere. "It's here." Yi-Ru-Zi's eyes flashed as he pointed at the original location of the door. As he pointed with his finger, the power in Yi-Ru-Zi's body shook, and he waved his hand. A formless and extremely profound power was born out of thin air, and it suddenly slashed down from above, creating a crack in space. It was an extremely obvious and mysterious crack. Behind the crack was a strange passage formed by various colors. This passage was extremely similar to the space-time passage created by the Bear Demon King's fist, but it was more stable and more transparent. "Open!" Jing-Ru-Zi spat out a light shout. As he said this, the crack twisted and changed, and finally turned into a 30-foot-tall door. It was a door that looked extremely similar to the stone door that Wu-Wen Nunnery had set up in this place. "Let's go, I've already found that side of the world," Jing-Ru-Zi said. "That's how it should be," Yi-Ru-Zi said with a smile. As they spoke, the two of them stepped into the space-time passage at the same time. As true Level 8 Origin Chi practitioners, the power of Jing-Ru-Zi and Yi-Ru-Zi's magical powers were far more powerful than any living being could imagine. Although the space-time passage's pressure was extremely great, and it was strange beyond imagination, with all sorts of unpredictable attacks appearing from time to time, to the two of them, it did not pose any threat at all. In the space-time passage, time and space were in a state of chaos. To the outside world, only a few dozen breaths had passed, but to Jing-Ru-Zi and Yi-Ru-Zi, at least a few days had passed. Jing-Ru-Zi and Yi-Ru-Zi finally broke through the space-time passage, and stepped into a strange world. The reason why this world was strange was very simple. It was because there were no rules or laws in this world. The entire world seemed to be a paste. All the power, all the vitality, and even the existence of space and time were mixed together in an extremely chaotic manner. If an ordinary living being stepped into such a world, even if they had become a Khanate Grand Luo, they would not be able to withstand it. It was very likely that they would be completely torn apart by the glue-like chaos, and become a part of the chaos. Of course, Jing-Ru-Zi and Yi-Ru-Zi were true Level 8 pseudo-saints, so they naturally would not be affected by such a simple change. The two of them floated in the midst of the chaos, and the aura that naturally emanated from their bodies had already stabilized the chaos around them, allowing them to have a peaceful space-time in the boundless chaos. The rules and laws that existed in this peaceful space-time were suppressed by the aura of the two of them. It was the aura of the two of them that replaced the original rules and laws, stabilizing the space-time out of thin air, so that the two of them would not be affected by anything in the outside world. They actually ran away? Iruzi said with a rather ugly expression. It seems that there are 4 other worlds that are closely related to this world. Let's go to the other worlds to take a look. Perhaps they might be in the other 4 worlds. Jingruzi also frowned, clearly uncomfortable. As he spoke, he did not wait for Iruzi to respond. He raised his hand and drew a line, and another space-time passage appeared, directly connecting to another world. When the two of them stepped into the other world through the space-time passage, the scene they saw was almost the same as the world they had passed through. It was similarly chaotic, and there were also no rules and laws. As expected, Jingruzi sighed and continued to open up the passageway, walking through the remaining 3 worlds. What he saw in that world was. It was exactly the same as the previous 2 worlds. Similarly, there were no rules or laws. It was also an indescribable chaos. Looks like that person must have entered these 5 worlds to extract the laws and laws of these 5 worlds. It's a pity that we're a step too late. If we'd arrived a step earlier, we would have died. We will definitely be able to capture that person. Iruzi was extremely indignant. Not at all. Unless we foresee the future and come here first. Otherwise, no matter how fast they came, it was also hard to catch him. This person was more cautious than I had imagined, but not as reckless as I had thought. If we had appeared earlier, he would have left long ago. Jingruzi shook her head and sighed. In such a chaotic world that had lost the rules and laws of this world, even though the two of them were grade 8 pseudo-sages with grade 9 pseudo-sages as their masters, they were unable to find the cultivators who had appeared in this world through the traces left behind here. Moreover, that cultivator was so cautious that he had even erased his traces before leaving. This made it almost impossible for the two of them to find that person's traces. Under such circumstances, one could imagine how disappointed the two of them were. Jingruzi and Iruzi left awkwardly after failing to find any traces of Luofan. At this moment, Luofan and the Temple Master of Wuan Temple had already appeared on the island where the Azure Sky Temple, the Een God religion, and the Temple Master of Wuan Temple were located. Moreover, they were in the sky above the mountain where the Savage Beast spiritual formation used to be, but was now divided into 3 parts by the 3 strange formations. This transaction can be considered a success. I will leave the laws and laws of the network to you, Luofan said as he handed the 5 spheres in his hand to the Temple Master of Wuan Temple. At this moment, the Temple Master of Wuan Temple seemed to be in a daze, as if she had not recovered from the drastic change. After hearing Luofan's words, she was shocked and quickly took the 5 fist-sized spheres that seemed to have countless cracks on them. They seemed to be made up of countless fragments that were the size of dust. She said, "Thank you, Senior. Wuan Temple will never forget your kindness." Everything that had happened just now was like a dream to the Temple Master of Wuan Temple. It had completely overturned the concept that she had formed over hundreds of millions of years of cultivation. It made her feel as if she had only truly realized the true nature of the world at this moment. Previously, although Luofan did not project the gathering of the grade 8 pseudo-sages that he had peeped at to the Temple Master of Wuan Temple, the Temple Master of Wuan Temple did not see it. However, the punch of the demonic Bear King had caused an extremely intense shock to the 5 world. That punch was extremely real, and one could even see many patterns on it. It was so obvious that it made her realize how powerful the person who had attacked them was. Even though she had witnessed the prowess of the powerful Gongguzi, she was still extremely shocked that such a powerful and malicious existence would attack them. At that time, she felt that she was so close to death and that she was so weak. That was because she had seen Gong Guzi and the grade 9 pseudo-sage Lu Xun before her. Although she was shocked, she could still accept it. However, what Luo Fan did next completely overturned her perception. After easily flattening the punch that was enough to shatter heaven and earth and blast a huge hole in the world, Luo Fan patted the divine sky cauldron gently, and the divine sky cauldron directly swallowed the world below it. Subsequently, the divine sky cauldron shook slightly and entered Luo Fan's body, as if it had never appeared before. After doing all this, she found that Luo Fan just raised his hand and made a grabbing motion, and the world they were in shook violently. Then, a fist-sized sphere that seemed to be composed of countless dust-like tiny fragments appeared in his hand. The moment the sphere was formed, he sensed that one of the 5 worlds that complemented each other had fallen into chaos, and all the rules and laws had completely disappeared. Subsequently, Luo Fan grabbed again. Another sphere that was more or less the same, but slightly different, appeared in his palm. And there was one more world where the nomological laws had disappeared. Just like that, Luo Fan grabbed 4 times in a row, and 4 spheres that seemed to be made up of countless fragments appeared in his hand. Similarly, all the nomological laws of the other 4 worlds apart from the world they were standing in had completely disappeared. The entire process only took a short 3 to 4 breaths of time. The speed of the change was so fast that she took a while to react. After she reacted, she completely understood. She knew that Luo Fan had grasped the void 4 times, but each time, he had completely grasped the law network of a world. It was effortless. He had transferred the nomological laws of the 5 worlds into spheres and into his hand. What kind of inconceivable divine ability was this? Could it be that the difference between a pseudo-sage and a non-pseudo-sage? Was it really that huge? One had to know that her sect had spent countless billions of years researching these 5 worlds, researching the method to completely extract the laws and laws of these 5 worlds, and had told her the final result. In order to completely extract the nomological laws of the 5 worlds, one had to extract the nomological laws of the 5 worlds at the same time to do so. Once there was any disharmony in the extraction process, one would have to bear the backlash of all the powers of the 5 worlds. That was a terrifying attack that even a pseudo-sage existence could not withstand. Because of this restriction, the Wu-Wunan Temple had not been able to find a way to extract the laws of the 5 worlds for hundreds of millions of years. Luo Fan, the man in front of her, just grabbed at the void 4 times in a row and extracted the nomological laws of the 4 worlds easily. Throughout the entire process, not to mention the backlash of the worlds, even his own body did not seem to have used much strength. It was as if it was not that easy. This made her wonder if the results of her sect's elders' research for so many years were simply wrong. Was it extremely simple and ordinary to extract the nomological laws of the 5 worlds? This kind of thing that almost completely subverted her concept happened in front of her, making her unable to react for a moment. She could only look at Luo Fan, who looked like an ordinary person in front of her, with an expression of shock, disbelief, and disbelief. Her mind was in a state of chaos. At that moment, Luo Fan casually patted, and a space-time tunnel was created. Then, she involuntarily followed Luo Fan into the tunnel. At the instant when they were about to completely enter the tunnel, Luo Fan turned around and grabbed at the void again. In an instant, a sphere that seemed to be formed by countless dust-like fragments appeared in Luo Fan's hand. At the same time, the world in front of the 2 of them paused for a moment. Then, a scene of great destruction appeared. All the vital energy, power, matter, and even time, space, and everything else in the entire world instantly lost their original appearance. It was as if the originally colorful and calm liquid that formed a landscape painting was suddenly stirred by a stick. The landscape painting that was originally formed by various colors was instantly thrown into chaos. In the blink of an eye, the entire world became what Jing Ruzi and Yi Ruzi had seen in the end. The nomological laws and the nomological laws were extracted like this? At that moment, all the chaotic thoughts in the mind of the Reverend of Wowen Monastery turned into a single thought. This thought was extremely absurd to her, and she felt as if she was in a dream. As the world changed, although the space-time tunnel still existed, it showed signs of instability. This made the Reverend of Wowen Monastery instinctively follow Luo Fan through the tunnel. By the time she came back to her senses, she had already returned to the center of the island, back to the mountain gate of Wowen Monastery, and heard what Luo Fan said. Clearly, Luo Fan had directly connected the space-time tunnel from that world to this island, and he did not pass through the island controlled by Wowen Monastery. After hearing what the Reverend of Wowen Monastery said, Luo Fan said indifferently, "A deal is a deal. There's no such thing as kindness. Due to some accidents that happened previously, the deal with the Een God cult will be delayed for a period of time. Please inform the fellow Taoist of the Een God cult." To Luo Fan, although what happened just now seemed easy, he had already unleashed his potential to the limit. At this moment, he was still rather scared. Moreover, although this island was quite far from the entrance of the space-time tunnel, which was also the place where more than 10 level 8 pseudosages were gathered, they were still in the same region of the sea after all. If one of those level 8 pseudosages was determined to find him, it would not be very appropriate to do so here, and there would still be a possibility of him being exposed. Under such circumstances, Luo Fan naturally did not have the mood to cause so much trouble, and he naturally could not carry out the deal with the Een God cult immediately. Chapter 1252. Luo Fan was not surprised that the Master of Wowen Nunnery would bring the news to the Een God cult leader. After all, she was a cultivator with shocking intelligence. How could Luo Fan not see the fear that the Master of Wowen Nunnery displayed earlier on? Under such fear, he believed that the Master of Wowen Nunnery would not risk offending him by hiding the news. As expected, the Master of Wowen Nunnery agreed to his request without hesitation. Seeing this, there was no need for Luo Fan to stay here any longer. With a slight thought, he took a step forward and arrived at the only peaceful country on the island, which was the Ling nation. He appeared in the Imperial Advisor's residence. Because the Een God cult, Wowen Nunnery, and Azure Temple were in conflict, the peaceful island was now in a state of war. Almost every country had entered a state of war and joined the camps of the three sections. As the strength of the three sects, they fought an intense war with the other camp. Under normal circumstances, even if a small country like the Ling Kingdom had grown many times, it was impossible for it to avoid joining the war. However, it was obvious that it was not a secret that Luo Fan was the Grand Tutor in the Ling Kingdom. If the three sects wanted to know, they would naturally find out after a little investigation. Because of Luo Fan's power, it was impossible for them to completely ignore Luo Fan's existence and Luo Fan's feelings towards the Ling Kingdom, and drag the Ling Kingdom into the swamp of war. Whether it was the nominal ruler of the Ling Kingdom, the Azure Temple, or the other two sects, it was the same. Therefore, although the three sects did not come to an agreement, they all gave way to the Ling Kingdom without prior consultation. This caused the surrounding kingdoms to fight to the death, and almost all of them to be emptied out. However, the Ling Kingdom still enjoyed the peace and tranquility of the past, as if nothing had happened. It was as if the tragic war that was happening in the outside world was in a completely different kingdom from the Ling Kingdom. To the people of the Ling Kingdom, this change was extremely strange. Of course, they felt that it was extremely strange. At the same time, he felt extremely fortunate about the changes. However, their imaginations were limited after all. No matter how hard they tried, they could not imagine that they would be able to escape unscathed and not have to participate in that tragic battle. Luo Fan was the cause of the war that left the entire island almost empty. When Luo Fan settled down in the Imperial Advisor's mansion, his heart skipped a beat. When he found out the truth, he couldn't help but smile faintly. So that's how it is. Looks like they're quite tactful, he thought. If the Ling kingdom was destroyed, although Luo Fan would not feel sad because of this, nor would he have any hatred towards the three great sects because of this, he would definitely be unhappy with the three sections. He might even go up to the three sects to teach them a lesson. After all, he was the state preceptor of the Ling kingdom and had made a promise to the Ling kingdom's emperor. If the Ling kingdom was destroyed, wouldn't he be going back on his words? Fortunately, such a thing did not happen. This was clearly a good thing to be thankful for. Whether it was for Luo Fan or the three great sects, it was the same for Tianqing Temple, Wuyun Temple, and Yin God sect. Luo Fan was spared from breaking the promise, and the three great sects were spared from Luo Fan's reprimand. After meditating in the imperial advisor's mansion for a few days, the former state preceptor of the Ling kingdom, who was also known as State Preceptor Mu, came to visit him. At that time, Luo Fan happened to stop meditating and sensed the arrival of State Preceptor Mu. His heart skipped a beat and he summoned State Preceptor Mu to him. Imperial Preceptor Mu had originally planned to wait for half a day before leaving as usual, but he did not expect that time and space would suddenly change, and he was already in the courtyard that he was very familiar with. He saw Luo Fan, who was sitting cross-legged and looked no different from before, just like an ordinary person. He was instantly stunned. Then, when he came to his senses, he was pleasantly surprised. He had never thought that Luo Fan would actually be in the imperial advisor's mansion. After all, this process of disappointment had repeated for a few years, and he had almost lost confidence. After a while, he came to his senses and said, "Greetings, Senior. This time, I came to disturb Senior because the Ling Kingdom's emperor strongly wishes to participate in the war on the island. He wants to take advantage of the chaos and conquer more countries so that he can complete his original plan of conquest earlier. I feel that it is inappropriate, so I came to ask Senior to make a decision. Don't mention this again. The plan to unify the island is temporarily suspended. We'll consider it again after the war on the island has completely subsided," Luo Fan said calmly. He did not explain too much and just gave the order. He then waved his hand and sent State Preceptor Mu out of the courtyard, allowing him to go to the palace to discuss with the emperor. An emperor is an emperor. Even if he has some cultivation, he is still an emperor. There is no limit to the desire for power. Luo Fan thought to himself, but his face remained expressionless. After thinking for a while, he raised his hand and took out a small aura world from his universe in his sleeve. He raised his hand and pointed. A few cultivators rushed out from the aura world and landed in front of him. These people were naturally the ones who had followed Luo Fan out of the technological universe and were taken into the aura world by Luo Fan. Although this aura world was formed by Luo Fan using his own power to gather the aura of the demon realm and was not a real world, it was real enough for demi-saint existences like the divine saint. It was enough to completely isolate the outside world from the outside world, preventing them from sensing what had happened in the outside world. Therefore, they did not sense what Luo Fan had experienced over the years. They did not even know if he had passed through the door and entered a new world or a new universe. They did not even know about the battle between Luo Fan and the true sovereign, or the many adventures he had experienced after entering the demon realm. They felt that they had been taken into an aura world by Luo Fan in their original universe. Then, after a long period of comprehending the aura, time and space suddenly changed. They appeared in a strange space and time. This space and time was extremely mysterious. It was filled with a strange aura that they were very familiar with, but it was even fainter than the aura they had felt before. Moreover, the stability of time and space had reached a level that they could not imagine in the past. They instantly understood that they had arrived in the world that the immortal and heavenly immortal had said was of a higher level than their universe. They looked up again. They saw Luo Fan sitting quietly in the pavilion in front of them. Knowing what was going on, they hurriedly bowed to Luo Fan and repeatedly thanked Luo Fan for allowing them to see the new world. This is the new universe that is of a higher level than your universe. Of course, what you see is still a layer away from the real new world. What you see is here. This is a cave abode that I have occupied. Outside of this cave abode is the real new world. Luo Fan looked at them. He said calmly, I understand. Thank you, Immortal. The Heavenly Immortal and the others said respectfully, now that I have completed what I promised you, if you want to leave, you can leave on your own. If you want to stay here, you can stay here. My current identity is the Imperial Preceptor of a small country. If any of you have nowhere to go, I will find a place for you in this small country. Luo Fan said casually. You don't have to decide now. You've just seen this world and don't know anything about it yet. You should first walk around and learn some general knowledge about this world before making a decision. Luo Fan saw that they were about to open their mouths and stop them. Thank you, Immortal, for your understanding. We will do as you say. Everyone hurriedly said. Luo Fan did not say much. He raised his hand and waved. They disappeared from the courtyard and appeared outside the Imperial Preceptor's residence. Then, Luo Fan slowly closed his eyes. With a thought, his consciousness entered the interior of the Creation God Palace and came to the side of the Air Maiden, who was trying hard to organize her world view. Currently, Space Maiden was floating in the void. Countless lights and shadows were faintly appearing and disappearing around her. Billions of scenes were constantly appearing and disappearing around her in every split second. Luo Fan glanced at these lights and shadows and guessed that the process of the air hostess sorting out her worldview would take a long time to complete. He couldn't help but feel helpless for a moment. After carefully sensing the Air Maiden's situation, he did not wake her up. With a thought, his consciousness returned to his body. He began to carefully recall the battle with Gong Guzi and the contact he had with Lu Xun. He carefully comprehended the many mysteries that he did not understand and did not grasp. The battle with a level 8 pseudo-holiness was an extremely rare experience. It contained countless mysteries that were beyond the scope of Luo Fan's current cultivation realm. If he could carefully comprehend it, it would definitely be of great benefit for him to break through from half-step pseudo-holiness to true pseudo-holiness without the help of magic treasures. Luo Fan was naturally very clear about this. At this time, because he had to avoid the limelight and avoid attracting the attention of the level 8 and level 9 pseudo-holiness, he could not make too big of a move in a short period of time. It was just the right time to carefully comprehend the mysteries. He did not expect to really step onto the stage and become a true pseudo-holiness through this comprehension, but there would definitely be some gains that would be of great benefit to his cultivation realm. While Luo Fan was comprehending the experience of fighting with level 8 pseudo-holiness Gong Guzi, the divine gods and the others who had just entered the demon realm were all extremely shocked at the vast world in front of them. The demon realm was a world with a round sky and a square earth. Such a world was completely different from the situation in the universe that they were originally in. Even if the heavenly gods and the others used their powerful divine abilities to create a gigantic continent in the void of the universe, it was still a far cry from this world with an orbicular sky and an orbicular square earth. There's actually such a world. The divine god could not help but mutter as he carefully sensed the surrounding world. Compared to this world, the crystal wall worlds created by the supreme divine land are like mud in a stinky ditch compared to diamonds. Holiness was even more emotional, and there was an inexplicable excitement in his shocked expression. As an existence who had controlled the supreme divine land for tens of billions of years with the mentality of an ordinary person, his obsession was many times more stubborn than others. He was many times more stubborn than the others. Under such circumstances, his understanding of this wonderful world was naturally much stronger than the others. Because of this, his heart was filled with the desire to explore this world. The deeply hidden decaying will that was attached to his body suddenly disappeared without a trace. I want to explore this world. I want to travel the entire world. Holiness had already set such a goal. Fellow Taoist Holy, are you sure? His words were heard by the Empyrean god at the side, and he couldn't help but be shocked. I think we should take a look at this world first. Let's understand the situation of this world before making a decision. Ha ha! Fellow Taoist heavenly god, you won't understand how I feel. My whole life, what he pursued was the truth of heaven and earth, the truth of the universe. For this, I endured the torment of years that could have made me commit suicide tens of thousands of times. Now that we've come to the source world that affects our universe, how can we still stay in this small country? Don't tell me you still want to be a lowly official here? His voice shook the heavens, and almost half of the country heard it. In this spirit kingdom, the number of cultivators was quite large. However, this was only a small country after all. Apart from Luo Fan, who was a half-step pseudo-saint, the strongest person here was only a connate grand heavenly realm cultivator. Among the people here, the weakest was a beginner demisage, while the strongest was an intermediate demisage like the Empyrean god, and the others were as weak as ant. Moreover, the Empyrean god and the others were currently at the entrance of the residence of the Spirit Kingdom's imperial advisor, where an unfathomably powerful cultivator resided. Even that unfathomably powerful cultivator didn't care about this person's laughter. How could they, who were like ants to this laughing cultivator, dare to say anything? Therefore, although the Empyrean god's voice shocked half of the Spirit Kingdom and made everyone unable to control themselves, no one dared to say anything. All the cultivators, including the Spirit Kingdom's emperor, acted as if nothing had happened and they hadn't heard anything. They continued doing what they were supposed to do. I understand what you mean, fellow Taoist, but I think it's better for you to report to the immortal elders before you leave. Hearing this, the Empyrean god knew that he couldn't dissuade the Empyrean god anymore. I know. How could the Empyrean god not know this? He chuckled and said so. As he spoke, a voice appeared out of thin air and entered everyone's ears. If you want to leave, then leave. There's no need to disturb me anymore. This voice belonged to Luo Fan. Clearly, the commotion outside the door had alerted Luo Fan, who was in the Imperial Advisor's residence. Luo Fan casually passed on the order. Hearing this, everyone understood that this was Luo Fan's order. The Empyrean god's body trembled, and he hurriedly turned around and bowed to the door of the Imperial Advisor's residence. He said, "Thank you, Immortal Elder, for sending me to this world. In the future, if a mortal elder has any orders, just say the word and I'll do it even if it means death." Go, go. Luo Fan's voice continued to enter their ears. The voice grew softer and softer until it could no longer be heard. The Empyrean god kowtowed to the door a few times and stood up. After saying goodbye to his companions who had been with him for tens of thousands of years, he turned into a ray of light and shot up into the sky. He left the small country and the island and headed towards the boundless ocean. He could faintly sense that it was the center of this world. Seeing the Empyrean god leave so decisively, the Empyrean god and the others looked at each other and shook their heads and sighed. The Empyrean god's departure was, of course, very straightforward, but it was clearly not a very wise choice. They had just entered this world. Even though they had experienced the aura of this world for a very long time, they still knew next to nothing about this world. How many experts were there in this world? How many people were stronger than them in this world? How many people were stronger than them in this area? What were the taboos in this world? What were the taboos? What was the cultivation system in this world? And so on and so forth. Everything was blank. Leaving under such circumstances was simply reckless to the point of suicide. Perhaps if they were a little too arrogant and flew past a certain place, they might arouse the dissatisfaction of some powerful existence and be killed. Perhaps they might accidentally step into a dangerous area and be unable to withstand the changes in the natural environment. Their bodies might be damaged, or they might even lose their lives. How could such a dangerous choice be made by a normal person? Although the Ling Nation was a small country on an island, it was still quite large. In the Ling Nation, there were many spiritual mountains and many cultivation sacred grounds. Many of the cultivators who had been subdued by Luo Fan and were originally imperial advisors of other countries lived on these spiritual mountains and sacred grounds. Even the original imperial advisor of the Ling Nation, Imperial Advisor Mu, had long moved to a nearby spiritual mountain. He did not dare to approach the capital of the Ling Nation where Luo Fan's Imperial Advisor residence was located. Chapter 1253. The Celestial God and the others were at least early-stage quasi-sages. Such powerful existences were nothing compared to the three great sects, but in the region of a certain small nation on this island, they were enough to suppress everything. The cultivators occupying various famous mountains and scenic spots in the Ling Nation could not refuse their request. Therefore, in just a few short days, the Celestial God and the others had a rough understanding of the situation in the entire demon realm. After understanding this, the Celestial God and the others made their own choices. However, not a single person was willing to leave this place so quickly to face such an exciting but equally dangerous world. After a brief discussion, the few of them had already made their decision. They went to the Ling Nation's imperial tutor's residence together and requested to see Luo Fan. They wanted to first obtain a position in the Ling Nation according to Luo Fan's original plan, which could be considered as barely confirming their foundation. In the future, they would see if they had the opportunity to experience this incomparably exciting high-level world. To Luo Fan, this was only a matter of a few words. He naturally did not care. He casually used a bit of his power as proof and sent the Celestial God and the others directly to the palace to seek out the Emperor. The Ling Nation's Emperor was naturally overjoyed at the arrival of the Celestial God and the others. As an ambitious emperor, the more powerful cultivators the Ling Nation's Emperor had, the better. The Celestial God and the others had extremely high cultivation realms, and were even more powerful cultivators. To him, even if there were hundreds or thousands of them, he would only welcome them. He would only welcome them without any dissatisfaction. Therefore, very soon, the Celestial God and the others became the Ling Nation's worshippers, and were sent to various places to guard the Ling Nation by the Emperor. Although the Ling Nation was extremely small compared to the entire island, because the island was unimaginably huge, the territory of the Ling Nation itself was quite large. With such a vast territory, even if the Celestial God and the others were spread out to guard it, there was no sign that they could not take care of it. On the contrary, if they were spread out like this, it would seem a little sparse. It almost made people wonder if this kind of guarding network was too sparse. The entire island was plunged into chaos, and only the Ling Kingdom at the edge of the island remained unaffected like a paradise. It might not be obvious in a short period of time, but as time passed, the Ling Kingdom would begin to stand out from the rest. More and more nations and living beings began to notice the difference in the Ling Kingdom. One was plagued by war, while the other was like a paradise. It was easy to imagine how a normal living being would choose. Therefore, in the next few years, in the many countries around the Ling Kingdom, refugees who had lost their homes due to the war surged into the Ling Kingdom like a tidal wave. They filled up the lands that the Ling Kingdom had just conquered not long ago, allowing the entire Ling Kingdom to slowly break away from its sparsely populated state. Although these refugees had migrated here, they had, after all, experienced the chaos of war. One could imagine how much they cherished peace. The Ling Kingdom could give them peace and stability. It gave them a place to live, and one could imagine how much they identified with the Ling Nation. And the existence of this identity, unknowingly, greatly increased the fate of the Ling Kingdom. At the same time, It allowed the power of the Ling Kingdom's imperial tutor's imperial seal that Luo Fan possessed to gradually increase without Luo Fan being prepared. One day, Luo Fan was in the midst of cultivation when he suddenly felt something inside his sleeve tremble. With a thought, he left his cultivation state. With a wave of his hand, the trembling object appeared in his hand. It was the imperial tutor's imperial seal. At this moment, the imperial tutor's imperial seal began to emit a strange golden light. This strange light was extremely mysterious. It communicated with a certain law in the law layer and gradually dyed that law gold. It then began to spread in all directions, and all the other laws and laws that were closely related to this law were dyed gold. The speed at which this golden light dyed everything was extremely fast. In the beginning, only the law that was connected to the imperial tutor's seal was affected and turned golden. However, in just a few breaths of time, the golden color had already contaminated all the nomological laws in the nomological law layer. It then began to spread outwards. After a few dozen breaths of time, it completely enveloped the entire Ling Kingdom and all the inhabited areas. This caused a strange golden light to slowly seep out from the depths of time and space in these areas. This golden light had an awe-inspiring and inviolable aura. Under the cover of this golden light, all living beings, even those that were not very intelligent, naturally felt a sense of pride and a sense of belonging. It was as if the land they stood on was their home, and the air they breathed was the air of their home. When this golden light reached this stage, the imperial tutor's imperial seal suddenly floated up. Then, the shape of the seal gradually changed from its original squarish shape. Above the seal, there were wrinkles that looked like auspicious clouds. The entire seal had an indescribable, profound aura, as if the level of the seal had been raised to a higher level. When this change occurred, Luo Fan felt that the connection between him and the laws of the demon realm had increased by more than 10 times. If it was before, he would still need to make some preparations to mobilize the laws of the demon realm. Now, he felt that the laws of the demon realm would even respond to his will in an extremely natural manner. He did not even need to do anything, and the laws of the demon realm would naturally change according to his thoughts and form the results he wanted. So this is the case. Looks like the fate of the Ling Kingdom has reached a new level. Luo Fan thought to himself. Right now, with his current strength, it was naturally not enough for him to sense the entire demon realm. However, sensing a large sea was an extremely simple task for him. Moreover, he was currently only on one of the many islands in the sea. All he needed to do was to move his heart slightly, and everything that happened on this island would naturally be known to him. This was the source that caused such a change in his imperial tutor's imperial seal. Through this understanding, he instantly grasped it. If the level of this imperial seal increases by another 2 or 3 levels, perhaps an ordinary cultivator would be able to exert power close to that of a demisage. Luo Fan raised his hand to hold the imperial tutor's imperial seal, and he could not help but reveal an indescribable expression on his face. At this moment, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. This is only a small country, but the fate energy within it is already enough to cause this imperial seal to undergo such a change. It is even enough to allow any ordinary cultivator to possess power close to that of a demisage. In that case, if the level of this country were to increase by a few levels or even a dozen levels, how much influence would this have on the imperial tutor's imperial seal? Would even sages benefit from it? In a trance, Luo Fan suddenly felt a chill in his heart. That's impossible. Those 54 sages wouldn't have incited such a massacre just because of this, right? As sages, they wouldn't be so shallow, right? As he thought about it, he could not help but shake his head, feeling that such a thing would not happen. What he had thought just now was simply ridiculous. However, if that's really the case, then I'm afraid that the secrets contained within the demonic realm are worth pondering over. Luo Fan felt slightly uneasy, but he did not dare to continue thinking about it. He carefully observed the imperial tutor's imperial seal in his hand, and studied the internal structure of the imperial tutor's imperial seal. He carefully sensed the specific changes that happened to the imperial tutor's imperial seal after the upgrade, and why these changes caused the power of the imperial tutor's imperial seal to increase tremendously. After some research, although he could not completely understand all the changes, he roughly understood why the changes in the imperial tutor's imperial seal would cause the power of the imperial seal to increase tremendously. The fundamental reason was none other than that. It was because of the golden light that was emitted from the imperial seal. This golden light was the result of the changes in the imperial seal. The reason why the golden light increased the power of the imperial seal was not because of the effect of the golden light on the imperial seal itself. Instead, it was because the golden light was acting on the layer of laws within the area that the imperial seal governed, causing the layer of laws within the area to undergo a miraculous change. It naturally became one with the imperial seal, breathing along with the imperial seal, and changing along with the changes of the imperial seal. This combination caused the surrounding world and the layer of laws to naturally change due to the imperial seal's response to Luo Fan's will, and naturally respond to Luo Fan's will. Although the power has increased by a lot, the range has been limited. This can be considered as both having their advantages and disadvantages. After understanding the changes in the imperial seal, Luo Fan could not help but sigh. Although the power of the imperial seal was many times stronger than before, because this power appeared due to the effect of the golden light, and the golden light itself was restricted within a fixed country, the natural resonance that the imperial seal brought to Luo Fan could only appear within this country. Once Luo Fan left the country with the imperial seal, the power of this natural resonance would disappear in an instant. What replaced it was the power of the imperial seal that could only strengthen the connection between the layer of laws and laws. While Luo Fan was comprehending the mysteries of the imperial tutor's imperial seal, the entire Ling nation was already in chaos. Wherever there were people in the kingdom, there would be golden light. To the residents of the Ling kingdom, this was something that couldn't be more obvious. This was clearly a sign that their nation was advancing. There were so many nations in the Devil Realm. Even on this average-sized island, there were tens of thousands of nations. With so many foundations, it was natural for a division of nations to be formed. In fact, the nations in the entire Devil Realm were divided into 33 levels, with the lowest being the 32nd rank and the highest being the supreme rank. Before Luo Fan entered the Ling nation was a nation level, which was the 32nd rank nation. A country of this level occupied the absolute majority in the entire Devil Realm. In other words, almost 90% of the nations in the entire Devil Realm belonged to this rank. What was the concept of a 32nd rank nation? In fact, such a division of ranks. It was not based on the size of the territory, but on the fate energy. More specifically, it was the recognition of the nation, and it was based on the number of citizens who were proud of the nation. A 32nd rank nation was the kind of nation that could form many imperial seals, which were necessary for establishing a nation, after offering sacrifices to the heavens. The strongest of such nations might be as big as the Ling nation before it had advanced, while the smallest might be a nation that was tens of thousands of times smaller than the Ling nation. However, no matter how big or small it was, as long as the seals in the nation, including the imperial tutor's seal, the heavenly sun's seal, and the official's seal didn't undergo any qualitative changes, which meant that the changes happening in the spirit nation didn't occur. Then, they would also be a 32nd rank nation. It finally reached the 31st rank. At this moment, countless people in the entire Ling nation sighed with mixed emotions and pride. The difference between each rank of a nation was extremely huge. Among the tens of thousands of nations on this island, the highest-ranked nation was only at the 30th rank. And there were only a few of them. There were only 3 of them, which were controlled by the Temple of Azure and the Een God cult respectively, in the hands of the three sects, the Wuyan nunnery. Moreover, even these three level 30 countries had only barely stepped into the level of level 30. Compared to the truly strongest country of the 30th rank, they were still many times away. Except for the 30th rank nations. Before the Ling nation advanced, the number of 31st rank nations was less than 15. It was not even 10 times more than the 30th rank nations. Below them were the rank 32 nations, which numbered in the tens of thousands. From the tens of thousands of transitional ranks on this island, it could be seen how difficult it was for the Ling nation to advance to the 31st rank nation, and how great the improvement was. I didn't expect the Ling nation to have such a day. When I die in the future, I will finally be able to face my ancestors. In the Ling nation's palace, the Ling nation's emperor looked at the radiant light around him and felt the imperial seal in front of him changing at the same time. His heart was filled with surprise and satisfaction. From now on, the Ling nation will only be inferior to the previous 10 nations on this island. It will definitely be a true, powerful nation. He lovingly caressed the royal seal that had completely changed in appearance. It had become more exquisite and more majestic, and his mood became incomparably calm. This change lasted for 2 to 4 hours before it subsided. When all the changes had subsided, the Ling nation's emperor held a court meeting and announced that in order to celebrate the Ling nation's advancement, there would be a general amnesty this year. At the same time, he decided to prepare for a sacrifice to the heavens 3 days later, to report to the heavens about the Ling nation's efforts, and to thank the heavens for the gift. After all this, the entire Ling nation was shrouded in an indescribable festive atmosphere. The citizens of the Ling nation originally felt a sense of belonging because it was a paradise, but due to the changes in the Ling nation, it gradually turned into a sense of belonging from the bottom of their hearts. Unknowingly, the Ling nation's providence had increased by a small level. Of course, there was still a huge gap between 31st rank nation and 30th rank nation. Unless the Ling nation could be strengthened by 10 times, or even 100 times, it could truly advance again. Now that the providence had increased by a small level, it was naturally impossible for the Ling nation to completely cross the gap between 31st rank nation and 30th rank nation. However, it still allowed the Ling nation to remain at the 31st rank nation level. After giving many orders, the Ling nation's emperor came to the imperial advisor's residence. He was here to pay a visit to Luofan. After all, as the emperor of the Ling kingdom, he knew very well that the reason why the Ling kingdom was able to undergo such a change and rise to the 31st grade so quickly was not because of his own hard work, nor was it because of the united efforts of the entire Ling kingdom. It was because of this unfathomable and powerful cultivator who had volunteered to become the Ling kingdom's state preceptor not long ago. Without the existence of this cultivator, the tens of thousands of nations on the island would have fallen into a quagmire of war. Why could the Ling nation stay out of it and become the only paradise on the island? If not for the imperial advisor, why did the nation that was originally in control of the Ling nation and could order the Ling nation to participate in the war not give any orders to the Ling nation? Why did the imperial advisor not allow the Ling nation to fulfill its promise of joining the Temple of Azure to fight against the other nations? This was only the most direct benefit. If not for the existence of the imperial advisor, the Ling nation would not have succeeded in conquering the neighboring nations. Without the existence of this cultivator, the Ling nation might have been swallowed up by a 32nd rank nation that disliked it, and the Ling nation might not have existed on this island. Under such circumstances, the emperor of the Ling nation might not feel much gratitude towards Luo Fan from the bottom of his heart, but he definitely cared about his existence. Therefore, after arranging everything that needed to be done, the emperor of the Ling nation personally came to visit Luo Fan. If this was in any other nation, it would obviously not happen. The emperor of any nation must be extremely dignified and in control of everything. No matter how powerful the imperial advisor was, he was still a subject of the emperor. Under normal circumstances, if the emperor wanted to see the imperial advisor, he would directly summon the imperial advisor to the palace. If the imperial advisor was too powerful, the most he could do was to greet him at the entrance of the palace. Chapter 1254. After a while, Luo Fan's voice came from the imperial advisor's residence. I already know everything. You may leave. He didn't pay any attention to the Ling nation's emperor at all and sent him away, not even willing to meet him. In the face of Luo Fan's rude order, the Ling kingdom's emperor naturally felt extremely uncomfortable. As the ruler of the Ling kingdom, he had great power. In the past, many powerful cultivators had to bow to him when they saw him. Now that he had lowered his status to see Luo Fan, he only received such a sentence. How could he accept such a difference in treatment? However, as the Ling nation's emperor, he knew how important Luo Fan was. Although he was uncomfortable, he didn't dare to say anything. How dare you? His Majesty has lowered himself to come here, and you dare to be so rude instead of coming out to greet him personally. Beside the Ling nation's emperor, a white-haired and bearded minister was so angry that his hair and beard almost stood on end. His whole body trembled as he shouted, "Shut up!" The Ling nation's emperor turned pale with fright and yelled angrily. The minister dared to speak at a time like this. How could he be chased away by the Ling nation's emperor? He knelt before the Ling nation's emperor and said, "Your Majesty, please forgive me. This man is arrogant and disrespectful. Today, I beg your Majesty to issue a decree to strip this man of his position as the imperial advisor. This is the law of the nation." As he spoke, he kowtowed several times, causing blood to splatter everywhere. An extremely tragic atmosphere assaulted everyone. "Rebel! Rebel! Someone come and drag this arrogant man away!" The Ling nation's emperor was so frightened that his limbs were cold. His voice was mixed with indescribable fear and panic. At this moment, there was no trace of the emperor's majestic aura from before. As soon as he finished speaking, 3 or 4 people hurriedly dragged the old man away with their hands and feet. The old man struggled and shouted, "This man is a demon! Your Majesty, don't trust this man. If your Majesty allows this man to be the imperial advisor, the nation will no longer be a nation. Your Majesty, this official is loyal and has always been thinking about His Majesty. If your Majesty doesn't strip this man of his position today, the Ling nation will be doomed. Your Majesty," the man screamed as he was dragged away. Finally, after leaving the crowd's sight, something covered the man's mouth, and a few muffled buzzing sounds could be heard. That person's voice had already stopped. At this moment, the emperor's face was still pale, and his body was trembling. "If I knew he would go crazy today, I wouldn't have brought him here. What a disaster! It was truly a great disaster. I only hope that the imperial preceptor will not be calculative with him." Only this thought flashed wildly in his mind. That was what the old official said. Naturally, it was not his intention, although he also thought that Luo Fan's attitude was a little too arrogant. But compared to the benefits he could bring, such an attitude was absolutely tolerable. As long as the Ling nation could obtain more benefits, his power would increase. If he was stronger, then even if Luo Fan's attitude was dozens or hundreds of times more arrogant, he would definitely be able to withstand it easily. However, he never thought that his official would be so concerned about the imperial preceptor's attitude, and even dare to explode at this moment. This was simply putting the Ling nation into a state of eternal damnation. What a fool! This old thing usually looks very rational. Why is he so stupid today? Doesn't he know that the imperial preceptor can wipe out the entire Ling nation with just a slight move? Not to mention that the imperial preceptor can bring me great benefits, even if there are no benefits and only disadvantages. What right does the Ling nation have to reject his request? How can I strip him of his position? The Ling nation's emperor was extremely nervous, and all sorts of thoughts flashed through his mind. With that thought in mind, he bowed towards the door of the imperial preceptor's residence and said, "The imperial preceptor focuses on etiquette and is a little pedantic. I hope that the imperial preceptor will spare his life on account of his loyalty to me." Spare his life? That doesn't seem to be what you should be focusing on. Luo Fan's voice came from the imperial preceptor's residence and flowed into the Ling nation's emperor's ears. The voice was very gentle, but it naturally contained an extremely high essence. It was as if the voice alone could shake the world and change the entire world. The Ling nation's emperor had heard Luo Fan's voice before, but never had he heard it as mysterious and profound as this one. Amidst this voice, he suddenly realized that the power and influence that he thought was important and powerful was actually so insignificant and insignificant. At this moment, he really wanted to cut the old official into 1,000 pieces. If it weren't for him, he wouldn't have to endure such pressure. At the same time, as a very smart person, he could tell from Luo Fan's words what Luo Fan meant. He was even more shocked and said, "Please forgive me, Imperial Preceptor. This was not my idea, but the Imperial Preceptor acted on his own. If the Imperial Preceptor doesn't believe me, I can immediately order him to be cut into 1,000 pieces to appease the Imperial Preceptor's anger." There's no need for that. This person's words make sense. From today onwards, I'm no longer the Imperial Preceptor of the Ling nation. The position of Imperial Preceptor shall be returned to the Emperor. Luo Fan's voice was like a bolt from the blue, directly blasting into the Ling nation's emperor's ears. The Ling nation's emperor felt an indescribable horror, and his mind instantly went blank. After a while, he finally realized what he had just heard. The Imperial Preceptor was going to resign from his position? The Ling nation was going to lose such an unfathomable and powerful existence who had allowed the Ling nation to maintain a peaceful state on this war-torn island. The Imperial Preceptor was going to abandon the Ling nation? What would happen to the Ling nation? Could the Ling nation still maintain its peace? Could the Ling nation continue to expand? Could the Ling nation maintain its current level and continue to be a 31st rank nation? These countless thoughts drowned him in an instant. Amidst these countless thoughts, the Ling nation's emperor truly hated the old official, the Grand Tutor, to the bone. Just now, he said that he wanted to cut the Grand Tutor into 1,000 pieces just to appease Luo Fan, to let Luo Fan see his sincerity. Now, however, the Ling nation's emperor really wanted to cut the old official into 1,000 pieces. Imperial Preceptor, no. Absolutely not. The Ling nation can't do without the Imperial Preceptor. The Ling nation's emperor completely forgot to be reserved. He immediately fell to his knees at the entrance of the Imperial Preceptor's residence and began to beg Luo Fan to retract his order. Such an attitude and degree of sincerity had reached a level that was unimaginable to ordinary people. The emperor of a nation, the one who was revered by the people and who only knelt down when worshipping the heavens and ancestors, was actually at the entrance of the Imperial Preceptor's residence, towards the nation's state advisor. To everyone present, this was an extremely shocking matter. Even the powerful cultivators who had sensed everything that was happening at this moment were extremely shocked. Even the powerful cultivators who had sensed everything that was happening at this moment were extremely shocked. Even the Ling nation's emperor had knelt down. The guards behind him naturally did not dare to remain standing. The eunuchs naturally did not dare to remain standing. Thud, 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 thud. All of them fell to their knees. Luo Fan did not respond to the Ling nation's emperor's plea. How could his decision be reversed so easily? Of course, he did not become the Ling nation's imperial preceptor just to enjoy the power that the position brought him. Instead, he wanted to personally become the imperial preceptor so that he could better experience the uniqueness of the demon realm and understand the mysteries of the imperial preceptor's seal. Now that he understood everything, he could deduce the trend of the Imperial Preceptor's seal's improvement through the changes. Under such circumstances, there was naturally no need for him to stay here as the Imperial Preceptor. If no one disturbed him here and everything went smoothly, he would not reject staying here. However, it was obvious that the Ling nation was rather dissatisfied with his existence as the Imperial Preceptor. Since that was the case, why should he continue to stay here? Didn't he have somewhere else to go? He stood up in the courtyard, took a light step, and appeared next to the Ling nation's emperor. He casually tossed the Imperial Preceptor's seal back to the Ling nation's emperor. The Ling nation's emperor was kneeling in front of the Imperial Preceptor's residence, begging Luo Fan bitterly. Suddenly, he found that Luo Fan had appeared out of thin air beside him and tossed something to him. The Ling nation's emperor instinctively raised his hand to catch the item. When he caught it, he discovered that although this item was quite different from the one he had given to Luo Fan, he could still tell that it was the Imperial Preceptor's seal that he had given to Luo Fan back then. At this moment, all his hopes of getting lucky were completely dispelled. So, he wasn't joking. It wasn't to raise the price. This thought instantly occupied the Ling nation's emperor's mind, causing him to instantly fall into despair. Luo Fan did not care about what the Ling nation's emperor was thinking, nor did he care about the heaven gods and the others who were guarding the Ling nation. He took a step forward and disappeared from the Ling nation's sight. He did not have much affection for the Ling nation. Of course, he would not care about its life or death. As for the heaven gods and the others, although he did have some ties with them, that kind of friendship was not enough for him to protect them at all times. Back then, he had promised to bring them into the Devil Realm, and now, he had even arranged a stable position for them. He had already done his part, but he could not continue to take care of them like before, let alone be their nanny forever. It was precisely because of this that he left the Ling nation without any reluctance, completely disregarding everything that was behind him. With Luo Fan's departure, or rather, with Luo Fan's abandonment of the Imperial Preceptor's seal, the entire Ling nation seemed to have become rootless duckweed. The strong sense of belonging that people originally felt had completely disappeared. Countless ordinary people who had just developed a sense of belonging to the Ling nation suddenly lost that sense of belonging. When they thought back to the past, they even felt an inexplicable surprise, surprised that they had such a sense of belonging before. Such an obvious change was naturally felt by the Ling nation's emperor. After all, he had the emperor's seal. Although it was not a seal that was extremely beneficial to cultivators like the Imperial Preceptor's seal, it was a seal that had deep control over all aspects of the Ling nation. It was precisely because of the existence of this seal that the Ling nation's emperor instantly felt the change that had taken place in the entire Ling nation. When he sensed the change, the Ling nation's emperor felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His entire body went limp, and he sat on the ground in a daze, muttering, "It's over, it's over." After muttering for a while, he suddenly became furious. "Men, bring the Grand Tutor here. Take good care of him." His voice was as cold as 10,000-year-old ice, causing the surrounding guards to tremble. Some of them even swayed, as if they could not withstand the cold, and almost fell to the ground. "Yes." Immediately, a few guards responded and quickly left the group. At this time, the Ling nation's emperor had already stood up. His face was filled with rage and malevolence, causing the surrounding temperature to drop by dozens of degrees. Everyone present dared not speak because of the change in his expression. They did not even dare to breathe too loudly. They could only wait on the side carefully. After a while, a few guards dragged the Grand Tutor, who was also in a daze, before the Ling nation's emperor. He was the old man with white hair and a white beard. "Grand Tutor, you're my teacher. I was able to defeat a few of my brothers. I ascended the throne. You have the greatest credit. I have always treated you as my true teacher. I've always treated you as my true teacher." The emperor of the Ling nation looked at the old man. There was no longer any coldness or anger in his eyes. There was only coldness, a coldness that seeped deep into his bones. This kind of indifference made the emotional pressure in the surroundings even stronger than before. It made it difficult for the eunuchs and guards present to breathe, and all of them broke out in a cold sweat. Your humble servant, has failed to live up to your Majesty's expectations. Your humble servant deserves to die. The Grand Tutor murmured as he knelt. He had never thought that things would turn out like this. As an old subject who had followed the Ling nation's emperor since he was still a prince, he was the one who had taught the Ling nation's emperor. His current status was second only to the Ling nation's emperor, and he was above tens of thousands of people. It could be said that his feelings for the Ling nation's emperor were not just those between an emperor and his subjects, but closer to that of a master and a disciple, or a father and son. Because of this, the Grand Tutor truly hated Luo Fan's attitude of ordering the Ling nation's emperor around like a servant, and he wanted nothing more than to cut him into 1,000 pieces. It was precisely because of this mentality that he had used such a resolute attitude to ask the Ling Kingdom's emperor to remove Luo Fan from the position of imperial tutor. It was to make Luo Fan restrain himself, so that Luo Fan could maintain the minimum level of respect for the Ling Kingdom's emperor. It had to be said that his loyalty could be seen by the heavens and the sun, and it was enough to be a role model for all his subjects. However, he didn't expect Luo Fan to be so decisive. He had merely suggested it, and the latter had voluntarily given up on the position and left the Ling nation. At this moment, the Grand Tutor finally recovered from his fervent desire to defend the imperial authority, and he instantly understood what had happened. At this moment, the entire Ling nation was embroiled in a quagmire of war. Dozens of surrounding nations were plundering and killing all over the Ling nation's territory. His descendants were lying in pools of blood, the Ling nation's emperor had committed suicide, the entire nation had completely disappeared, and many other terrifying scenes flashed across his mind. Despair and fear instantly sobered him up, and his heart was filled with endless despair and regret. What have I done? In his days, the Grand Tutor was dragged back to the Ling nation's emperor by the guards. He saw the Ling nation's emperor, and he heard the latter's words. As an old subject who had followed the Ling nation's emperor since he was a prince, the Grand Tutor's understanding of the Ling nation's emperor might even be deeper than the Ling nation's emperor himself. When the Grand Tutor saw the Grand Tutor's expression, he knew that the Ling nation's emperor had already made up his mind to kill. It was a murderous intent that could not be washed away no matter what he did. However, the Ling nation's emperor did not immediately order for the Grand Tutor to be killed. Instead, he looked at him coldly and said, "I was born in the imperial family. For the sake of this throne, my parents, brothers, and sisters have always schemed against each other, plotted against each other, and guarded against each other. When they fought, it was even more tragic than when they fought against each other. I've never enjoyed familial love from them. Grand Tutor, you are my first teacher. Although we're both subjects, I've enjoyed familial love from you that my parents and brothers can't." The Grand Tutor was touched and regretful at the same time. He prostrated on the ground with tears streaming down his face, unable to speak. "Because of this rare familial love from the imperial family, I've done what no other emperor can do for you. I've given you an honor that no other emperor can." The Ling nation's emperor finally sighed. The Grand Tutor, who was kneeling on the ground, suddenly raised his head and said, "Your Majesty, I've made a grave mistake and have become a sinner of the Ling nation for all eternity. I no longer have the face to live in this world. Your Majesty, please give the order for me to be executed by 1,000 cuts." Upon hearing this, everyone's expressions changed drastically, except for the Ling nation's emperor. They looked at the Grand Tutor in shock. Chapter 1255. Hearing the old man's words, the emperor's expression didn't change much. He just quietly looked at the old man, and his eyes were still as cold as before. "Forget it. In order to answer to the entire nation, I have to take the Grand Tutor's life. However, there's no need for a death of 1,000 cuts, he said flatly. I thank your Majesty for your kindness. The old man said with tears streaming down his face. The Emperor shouted to the guards on both sides, Men, take off the Grand Tutor's official robes and throw him into the death cell. 3 days from now, the execution will be carried out. We will personally supervise the execution. Yes. The guards on both sides responded in unison. Then, a few people came up and dragged the old official away from the scene. After the guards dragged the old man away, the Ling nation's emperor stood there in a daze and quietly looked at the imperial tutor residence in front of him. Although he did not show it, his heart was in a mess at that moment. A kind of helplessness, a kind of loss, and a kind of despair filled his entire mind. It made him feel like the originally light yuan qi around him had become an incomparably heavy boulder. It made him feel like he needed to use all his strength just to breathe. That indescribable feeling of suffocation made him involuntarily clutch his chest. Your Majesty, I'm tempted to go out and travel for a while. I'm afraid I won't be able to return anytime soon, so I've come to resign. Please forgive me, Your Majesty. At this moment, a figure materialized in front of the Ling nation's emperor and bowed to him. He said so. The figure looked like a middle-aged Taoist. The emperor knew at a glance that he was a Khanate Grand Luo cultivator, a cultivator he had subdued during his conquest of other nations. Now, he was in charge of managing the mountains and rivers of the Ling nation. He really came. Although the Ling nation emperor was very reluctant to resign from his position, he knew it was inevitable. There was nothing he could do to stop it. He could only sigh and say, Taoist priest, you may leave. Cultivation is still more important. The middle-aged Taoist smiled slightly. After bowing to the Ling nation's emperor, he turned into a rainbow and soared into the sky. In midair, faintly, a sentence floated down. The sea is wide, the fish leap. The sky is high and the birds are free to fly. The middle-aged Taoist arrived. It was like opening a hole in a dam, triggering an extremely intense consequence. In the next hour or so, almost all of the cultivators in the spirit kingdom, except for the heavenly gods who had just joined, including the former imperial teacher Mu, came to resign their positions. Some directly returned the seal, and some who didn't have a seal came empty-handed and floated away. In just an hour, the entire Ling nation had fallen from its original state of prosperity to a state of disarray. The departure of these cultivators completely destroyed the last bit of hope that the Ling nation emperor had. Previously, when Luo Fan left, he was at a loss and in despair, thinking that the fate of the spirit kingdom would be reversed and that it would fall. However, there were still many cultivators here. Even without Luo Fan, the spirit kingdom was still considered an extremely powerful nation in this area. The surrounding nations would not dare to provoke it, let alone invade it. However, as the other cultivators left, his hope was completely dispelled. One must know that the current territory of the spirit kingdom was already a big piece of meat in this area. If such a big piece of meat grew on a tiger, naturally no one would dare to touch it. However, if it grew on a fat pig, it would be waiting for someone to cut it off. In the past, with so many cultivators serving in the spirit kingdom, the spirit kingdom was like a tiger. Now, without the protection of those cultivators, the spirit kingdom was reduced to a fat pig. Fortunately, there are still heavenly gods and other cultivators from a few years ago who haven't left. They are so powerful, why don't I find one of them to be the state teacher? The Ling nation emperor suddenly thought of something, and an inexplicable hope surged in his heart. Of course, he did not dare to think about whether this hope was real or illusory. 2 hours later, the Ling nation emperor returned to the palace. Furthermore, he was not resting in a place like the upper study room. Instead, he was resting in the main hall, where the court assembly that had just been held was being held. As for the matter of preparing people to worship the heavens, there was naturally no need to arrange it now. At this time and in the current state, the spirit kingdom was about to fall. Worship the heavens? Could it be to tell the heavens that the spirit kingdom was about to be finished? The court meeting was currently in a state of dead silence. Hundreds of people were lined up below, but no one dared to make a sound. In fact, no one dared to breathe too loudly, as if they were afraid that their voices would attract the attention of the Ling Nation Emperor. Report! Urgent report! An extremely hurried voice came from outside the main hall. Then, a burly man in a soldier's uniform rushed in from outside the main hall in a panic. Impudent! How dare you barge into the main hall of the court meeting? Someone, drag him away and punish him for being disrespectful before the emperor. At this moment, an old man standing at the very front shouted in an extremely loud voice. This voice broke the deathly silence in the hall and made everyone heave a sigh of relief. Prime Minister, let's hear what the news is first. At this moment, a trace of disgust flashed across the Ling Nation Emperor's face. The person who spoke was the Prime Minister of the Ling Nation. If these words were said during normal times, the Ling Nation Emperor would only be delighted. However, at this moment, the Ling Nation Emperor only recalled the words of the Grand Tutor at the State Teacher's residence, as well as the consequences of the Grand Tutor's words. Of course, the feeling was completely different from usual. If it weren't for the fact that he did not want to leave a tyrannical reputation, he even had the urge to drag the Prime Minister out and sentence him to death. Since the Prime Minister could do this, how could he not know that his flattery had gone too far? He hurriedly retreated. He thanked His Majesty for his magnanimity. What urgent report do you have? Hurry up and report it. The Ling Nation Emperor looked at the battered soldier below and said. The soldier's face was full of panic, and his entire body was trembling slightly. His despair was so obvious that even a fool could see it. The Ling Nation Emperor did not pay attention to the soldier before, but now that he saw the soldier's appearance clearly, he suddenly had an ominous feeling. As expected, the soldier's next words made him realize how accurate his premonition was. Although he would rather have his premonition be wrong, the immortal master guarding the East River town has left. The soldier said with difficulty. The soldier said with difficulty, left. The soldier's words instantly plunged the entire main hall into an atmosphere of despair. The Ling Nation Emperor's body swayed, and he directly collapsed onto the dragon throne. The aura of complete despair emanated from his body continuously. The Ling Kingdom's Emperor's body swayed, and he slumped onto the dragon throne. An aura of complete despair emanated from him. Hudong Town was the town that the Spirit Nation's Emperor had assigned to the Heaven God and the others to guard. It occupied about 1% of the entire Ling Nation. Logically speaking, just the departure of the cultivators guarding the town was not a big deal. That was nothing. After all, it was only 1% of the area. Even if there were no cultivators guarding it, it would still be fine. Even if there were no cultivators guarding the town, it would not be a big loss to the Ling Nation. However, what worried them was that, if the cultivators from East River Town had left, what about the other cultivators who served in the Ling Nation along with the cultivators guarding the town? Would they make a different choice from the cultivators guarding the town? Report. Very soon, before the Emperor and his ministers could react, an urgent report came from outside. Several soldiers rushed into the hall one after another, bringing news that made them despair one after another. In the 2 hours just now, the heavenly gods and the others who took the initiative to ask for a position a few years ago had all left. They didn't even bother to come back and say a word to the Ling Nation's Emperor. This was the final hope of the Ling Nation's Emperor. I don't believe it. Men, drag these bastards who lied about the military intelligence away and beat them to death with sticks. Beat them to death. The Ling Nation Emperor suddenly yelled hysterically. I'm innocent, Your Majesty, I'm innocent. The Ling Nation Emperor's words made the soldiers, who were already panicking and in despair, lose their composure. Everyone cried and screamed. Since the Ling Nation Emperor had spoken, the guards naturally came forward and pulled the soldiers up. Ignoring their cries and screams, they were dragged out of the great hall. Then, the sounds of sticks cracking and miserable cries came from outside the great hall. It took a while before they completely disappeared. Then, the guards came forward to report that the mission had been completed. "Your Majesty, what should we do next?" The entire great hall was filled with dead silence. The Prime Minister braced himself and stepped forward to ask. "What should we do? What should we do?" The Ling Nation Emperor murmured. Suddenly, he flew into a rage and shouted, "I'm the Ling Nation Emperor, and you're my subjects. You should be helping me solve my problems. Why are you asking me what to do? If you have to ask me for everything, what use do I have for you?" These words caused everyone present to feel embarrassed. Even the Prime Minister had to lower his head, not daring to say another word. The entire hall fell into a deathly silence. More than an hour later, one of the civil officials finally could not hold it in anymore. He braced himself and stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the most important thing now is to appease the people. It's best if we can maintain their morale and ensure that the Ling Nation's grade doesn't drop. After that, we can search for cultivators to be the state preceptor." The eyes of many officials in the great hall brightened at these words, and they all stepped forward to echo his sentiments. More than a dozen of them even applied to the Ling Nation Emperor for them to go to the places where there were rumors of cultivators to invite them to take over the position of state preceptor. The Ling Nation Emperor looked at the officials in the great hall, his heart filled with hatred and disgust. At a time like this, even the cultivators who originally worked here had left voluntarily. Where else could they find cultivators who dared to come here to be state preceptors? These suggestions were stupid to the extreme. However, after calming down for more than an hour, he had already thought it through. If he continued to delay here, then there would be no conclusion to this matter. He was too lazy to explain it to them. He looked at the officials who took the initiative to leave and went to invite the cultivators, not caring about their original identities. He directly granted them the status of imperial envoys and sent them away, telling them to do what they wanted. Of course, the civil official's suggestion also had to be done. That was to stabilize the people's morale. In this world, the people's morale was the most important thing in a nation. The suggestion to stabilize the people's morale naturally made sense. Therefore, the Ling Nation Emperor directly asked the civil official to think of some ways to stabilize the people's morale. He could not be bothered to care about the people's morale. Although the people's morale was important, it was not fundamental. No matter how many methods were used, it would only yield half the result with twice the effort. Although the Ling Nation Emperor knew that this was extremely necessary, he didn't have much hope for it, so he naturally didn't bother to do anything about it. He did not want to see these incompetent officials any longer. These officials who only knew how to spoil things. The Ling Nation Emperor directly dismissed the court. He told those officials to scram out of his sight. Those officials had long been unable to stay here any longer. After the Ling Nation Emperor dismissed the court, they left at an unprecedented speed. After returning to the palace, the Ling Nation Emperor sat in a daze for a few hours. The changes that would happen to the Ling Nation kept revolving in his heart. Unknowingly, he had already dug into a dead end, and the despair in his heart grew stronger and stronger. If someone came to persuade him at this time, he might be able to extricate himself from the dead end. However, who would dare to seek trouble at this time? Therefore, the Ling Nation Emperor dug deeper and deeper into the dead end. The despair in his heart accumulated more and more, and in the end, it gradually spread out and shrouded his entire body in a strange black smoke. At this moment, the Ling Nation had just broken through from a 32nd grade to a 31st grade country, and the entire nation was still in an extremely active state. Extremely active. In other words, it was extremely easy to be influenced. Therefore, under the current circumstances, the aura of despair on the Ling Nation Emperor, which was so thick that it had almost materialized, was gradually affecting the Ling Nation's nature and affecting it more and more clearly. The first to change was the Heavenly Sun's imperial seal, which was also the Ling Nation's imperial seal. The imperial seal that was originally shining with a golden light and exuded boundless majesty and holiness had unknowingly taken on a faint layer of black. Under this black halo, the majesty and holiness that the imperial seal exuded gradually changed. The majesty became a pressure, and the holiness became a high and mighty one. Although there was only a small difference between the two, the aura they represented was already completely different. The previous appearance revealed the aura of a wise ruler. The latter, however, was the aura of a tyrant. After the imperial seal began to change, the other official seals also began to change. That change was different from the change in the imperial seal, but the essence was the same. It had also changed from being open-minded to being tyrannical. It had also changed from positive to negative. When the seal began to change, the aura of the entire country changed along with it. The feeling of belonging that made all living beings within the boundaries of the spirit kingdom slowly turned into a feeling of fear. This change was even more intense and obvious than the change after the imperial tutor's imperial seal left Luo Fan's hands. In an instant, all the living beings in the Ling Nation felt a sense of panic and fear. This feeling of panic and fear arose from the depths of the laws and laws. There was no reason at all, and no one knew what was going on. They didn't know what caused such fear. Under normal circumstances, this kind of fear should have caused everyone in the nation to lose heart and soul. They would either flee or rebel. However, this was not the case. Although there was this unexplainable fear and panic, as well as this change that was completely different from the past, no one felt the urge to rebel or flee. Instead, they were more united and more certain that they were a part of the Ling Nation. This could be said to be another sense of belonging. A sense of belonging that was born from fear and panic. After this change, an extremely faint layer of black fog suddenly appeared from nothingness. It shrouded the entire territory of the Ling Nation, including all the populated areas. At this moment, the Ling Nation's emperor felt his body and mind relax. Although the feeling of despair was still present, it was still unimaginably intense, and could still be seen with the naked eye. However, it seemed to have become an incomparably natural emotion, and he didn't feel it was out of place at all. It was as if he should have this feeling of despair in the first place. This feeling of despair was a feeling that was engraved in the depths of his soul. "What's going on?" the Ling Nation's emperor murmured. At this moment, he couldn't help but have a strange smile on his face. At first glance, this smile looked extremely warm, but upon closer inspection, one would find that it was a smile that was so cold that things would move in the opposite direction when pushed to the extreme. At this moment, in the center of the island, Luo Fan, who was conversing with the dark god cult master, suddenly felt his heart skip a beat. He discovered that the rune structure on his robe suddenly trembled. Then, the rune structure naturally produced all sorts of strange and mysterious changes. All sorts of strange lights continuously pulsed, and it took a while for it to calm down. Chapter 1256. At this moment, after the rune structure on his robe changed, its power had increased by an entire level. After the increase in level, its power had also increased greatly. Before this, if the robe wanted to completely isolate Luo Fan's mysteries, he would need to do his best to hide all of his mysteries and weaken the pressure on the robe. Only then would he be able to prevent the half-step pseudo-sage imprint from appearing in the depths of his soul when he was in the outside world. At this moment, he felt that the power of the robe was completely enough to withstand his current state. In fact, he felt that even if he raised his cultivation realm by another level, the robe would still be able to completely isolate all of his mysteries. He did not need to conceal his mysteries to prevent living beings in the outside world from seeing his figure, hearing his voice, or sensing his aura to obtain the pseudo-sage imprint. Luo Fan was the creator of this rune structure. He naturally knew all the changes that had happened to the rune structure, as well as the reason for these changes. Therefore, after sensing the changes for a while, he discovered the source of the changes and knew what had caused the rune structure to change. The source of the changes was the changes that had occurred in the spirit kingdom. This rune structure was a mysterious structure that Luo Fan had comprehended from the Imperial Tutor's seal. When this structure was first born, the demon realm had naturally produced all sorts of abnormal phenomena to respond to this change. Luo Fan knew it at that time. This rune structure was very different from the Imperial Tutor's seal. However, they were extremely similar in nature. The Imperial Tutor's seal could continuously increase in power through the providence of the country that the Imperial Tutor's seal corresponded to. This rune structure could also increase in power through the change of some external object that was related to the rune structure. However, over the years, Luo Fan had never sensed the existence of anything on this island that could increase the rune structure. It was as if he could only find such an item in other places in the demon realm. All this while, although Luo Fan did not put in the effort to look for it, he still felt some regret in his heart. Until today. After he abandoned his position as the imperial preceptor of the Ling Kingdom and left the Ling Kingdom, the changes in the Ling Kingdom made him understand that the mystery behind the rune structure was still the kingdom. It seems that I can't completely ignore the country. Luo Fan sighed to himself. Now, he completely understood the conditions needed to improve the rune structure's power. The power of the Imperial Tutor's seal increased. What he needed was the fate of the country. The improvement of the rune structure did not require the destiny of the nation, but rather a form of imprisonment. A kind of intangible, abstract thing like a country to all the people within it, all the people. It was a kind of imprisonment for all living beings. Every country had a restraining effect on its own citizens. However, in an ordinary country, this kind of imprisonment effect would not work. But it was all covered up by fate energy. In reality, it had become a part of fate energy. Only a country like the Ling Kingdom would experience a fundamental change. It had changed from a country that relied on its population and citizens' sense of belonging to a country to one that didn't care about their sense of belonging at all. Instead, it used an invisible fear to control and imprison its citizens so that they wouldn't dare to leave the country. In fact, they wouldn't even have the thought of leaving the country. Only then could the imprisonment be raised to the point where it could affect the rune structure. After understanding this, Luo Fan also knew what to do. The Ling Kingdom did not need to continue expanding in a short period of time. It only needed to maintain its current scale and the current state of the people. However, there was a prerequisite, and that was that the Ling Kingdom had to continue to exist, and it had to exist for a very long time. After thinking it through, Luo Fan directly said to the Yin God cult master in front of him, "I still have a use for the country that I previously served as the imperial preceptor. Can you let it continue to exist?" Although these words were spoken in a questioning tone, the Yin God sect master absolutely did not dare to think that Luo Fan was suggesting to him, let alone refuse. He immediately smiled and said, "Of course, there's no problem. Whatever senior wishes, we will do." Immediately, he raised his hand and shot out 3 rays of light into the wild beast spirit formation that had been divided into 3 parts. He did not just inform the Yin God cult, but also the other 2 sects at the same time. The Yin God cult master naturally did not inform the other 2 sects out of kindness. It was because of the Yin God cult master's cautiousness. Although Luo Fan did not ask him to inform the other 2 sects, since Luo Fan had already told him to protect the Ling Kingdom, it meant that the Ling Kingdom had to be preserved. Under such circumstances, it was obviously not enough for the countries controlled by the Yin God cult not to invade the Ling Kingdom. If the God cult did not invade, and the countries controlled by the other two sects destroyed the Ling kingdom, it made Luo Fan unhappy and he wanted to destroy the God cult. How could he dare to tell Luo Fan that it was not their sect that did it, that it was not their fault, and that it was wrong to destroy the God cult? That was simply a joke. It was because of this cautious consideration that the God cult master made such a seemingly kind gesture at this time. Seeing this, Luo Fan was naturally quite satisfied and thanked him. The God cult master naturally did not dare to be negligent. Then, he said, the space-time tunnel is quite far from here. How about we set off now? Now that Luo Fan had come here to meet the God cult master, he naturally wanted to complete the deal that they had agreed on previously. If the structure of the runes had not changed, they would have already reached the entrance of the space-time tunnel. At this moment, Luo Fan naturally would not object. He nodded and said, "Fellow Taoist, please lead the way." The God cult master nodded in agreement. Then, he turned into a ray of light and charged diagonally towards the void in the northwest direction. It's actually above. Luo Fan could not help but be slightly surprised when he saw this. He lifted his foot and took a light step forward. He chased after the sect leader of the God sect and followed him towards the void in the northwest direction. After hundreds of thousands of miles, the two of them directly broke through a barrier and rushed into a vast starry sky. Looking back, they saw that the demon world was completely covered by a layer of fog. This fog was boundless and covered the entire demon world. Luo Fan's eyes flashed. He directly passed through the fog and found that the demon world was below. However, he did not go through any process. It was as if the fog did not exist at all. He directly entered the demon world. However, he could not see the relationship between the demon world and the starry sky at all. Was it a boundless land or a strange star? It's a very mysterious kind of fog. With one look, Luo Fan knew that this was due to the effect of the fog. He could not help but smile and inwardly exclaim in admiration. This starry sky was boundless. The yuan qi that filled it was naturally many times thinner than the demon world below. The stability of time and space was also hundreds of times worse than the demon world below. However, this starry sky was filled with incomparably dense essence of the stars. This essence of the stars was extremely dense, but also extremely violent. It was extremely dense, but it was also extremely violent. If an ordinary person were to appear in such a starry sky, that person would definitely be minced into pieces by this extremely violent star energy at the first possible moment, turning into countless tiny strands of flesh and blood. They would disappear without a trace. Even if a cultivator had not reached the immortal realm, they would definitely be courting death by appearing here. If they appeared here, they would definitely be courting death. It would be difficult for them to remain intact. Unless they had the protection of a powerful artifact or cultivation realm above the immortal realm, they would not be able to remain intact in this starry sky. The God sect's leader was very concerned about Luo Fan. Seeing that Luo Fan was interested in the starry sky, he began to explain to Luo Fan what he knew about the mysteries of the starry sky. For example, this starry sky contained the ruins of countless formidable cultivators from the past. For example, this starry sky contained countless formidable treasures of heaven and earth that couldn't be found in the devil dimension. For example, countless shocking battles and slaughters occurred in this starry sky at every moment. For example, it was said that many formidable cultivators had set up abodes in this boundless starry sky, and so on and so forth. This allowed Luo Fan to understand the starry sky more and more. Both of them were half-step pseudo-sacred realm cultivators. Their senses had reached an unimaginable level. In the blink of an eye, the scene within a range of billions of miles and light years was directly reflected in their hearts like the reflection of the moon in a well. It just so happened that there was an extremely tragic battle going on within this range. The two sides were not just two people, but two teams. There were nearly 100 cultivators fighting each other. The strongest of these cultivators was already at the advanced stage of the Sage-to-be realm, while the weakest was at the intermediate stage of the Sage-to-be realm. They burst out all kinds of powerful magic skills in the void. Although the power of the magic skills was not much stronger than in the demon world, the starry sky itself was different from the demon world. Because of the difference in the structure of the laws and the structure of time and space, the effect and power of the magic skills were thousands of times stronger than in the demon world. Almost every move and the effect of the magic skills could only be created by half-step pseudo-sage existences in the demon world, or even real pseudo-sage existences. After sensing for a while, Luo Fan also knew why they were fighting in the starry sky instead of the demon world. The reason was that the space here was bigger. There was enough space for them to fight to their heart's content. The battle between over 100 of them required a space of hundreds of millions of miles, so that they wouldn't interfere with each other and affect each other. Only then would they be able to perfectly unleash their abilities and power. The demon world was like the boundless sea. Given their strength, if they dared to occupy such a large space to fight, it would be like provoking the powerful pseudo-sage existences, who knew when they would be crushed to death with just a finger. Only in this boundless starry sky, they could occupy such a large space to fight. Only then would they not offend others and cause the displeasure of the powerful pseudo-sage existences. Luo Fan watched their fight for a while and found that it was not interesting at all. He shook his head and no longer cared about it. He continued on his journey with the Een God cult leader. The Een God cult leader's destination was deep in the starry sky. The distance to the demon world. It was about a few billion light years away. This distance was like light. It would take them hundreds of millions of years to reach it. However, to the two of them, it only took a short 15 minutes for them to cross it easily. During this distance of a few billion light years, the two of them passed by dozens of cave residences left behind by ancient cultivators who had once set up cave residences in this starry sky. Among them, there were dozens of cultivators who were fighting fiercely. The chaos made Luo Fan understand the nature of the demon world even more deeply. The yuan qi in this starry sky was much thinner than in the demon world, but the aura of the demon world was much denser. The unique destructive aura contained in the power of the great tribulation of heaven and earth was also much denser than in the demon world. This is it. Suddenly, the Een God cult leader stopped outside a star. In this boundless starry sky, there were countless stars. However, these stars were not like the universe that Luo Fan had experienced before, which was a fixed star. Instead, it was an extremely special kind of star that was completely formed by the star essence transforming into all sorts of special forms according to a certain special form. These stars were all strung together. From a certain point of view, all the stars in the starry sky could be regarded as a whole. Such a whole made it so that if any cultivator wanted to touch any of the stars, it would be like touching all the stars in the starry sky. They would definitely suffer the backlash of the entire starry sky. It was because of this characteristic. Because of that, although the countless stars were formed using a special method of condensing the essence of the stars, and if a cultivator who cultivated in the art of stars were to completely devour them, they would be able to obtain endless benefits. However, no cultivator would dare to come here and pluck these stars. At most, they would set up some cave residences on the surface of the stars and use the most direct method to absorb the essence of the stars. The Een God cult leader appeared in this starry sky with Luo Fan. There were 108 stars that formed a small hole. This small hole seemed to form a strange array. Under the effect of the array, the essence of the stars emitted by the array formed an even more mysterious and high-quality strange essence. They formed an even more mysterious and higher-quality strange essence qi, which evolved into one invisible whirlpool after another in the air, giving off all kinds of indescribable mysteries. I'm afraid it took a lot of effort for your sect to find this position. Luo Fan looked at this almost natural formation and said with a smile, "Senior, please don't laugh. Back then, our sex ancestors spent countless years searching in the starry sky. Finally, by chance, he found this location and discovered a space-time passage hidden in the midst of these countless whirlpools," the Een God cult leader said. Luo Fan smiled. What kind of existence was he? Although he had only just seen the array formed by the 108 stars, he already knew the power of this array. As a naturally formed array, its power was obviously not like that of a cultivator's array, which had an absolute target. Generally speaking, natural arrays were formed by all kinds of coincidences between the heavens and the earth. They naturally contained endless mysteries of the heavens and the earth. But at the same time, because this was a kind of coincidental array, the power of this kind of array would be extremely chaotic. It would involve a little bit of everything, but it would be difficult to use everything to the limit. The array in front of him was the same. Among them, there was the effect of condensing star essence, the characteristic of distorting time and space, and even the characteristic of forming a star domain. There were many kinds of them, and they were almost all-inclusive. Among these kinds of strange powers, the characteristic of distorting time and space was the strongest. These distortions combined to form those strange whirlpools. These whirlpools were essentially formed by the distortion of spacetime. Most of them were just simple distortions, but there was a vortex among them. By coincidence, it was compatible with a world outside the demonic realm, forming a truly smooth spacetime passage that could connect to another world, another spacetime. With a slight thought, Luo Fan found the location of that whirlpool. He pointed at it, and the whirlpool emitted a faint light. "It's that one. Is that the world that you want to integrate with the half-step pseudo-sage treasure? Senior is very observant. I admire you." "It's that spacetime passage," the Een God cult leader said hurriedly. Hearing this, Luo Fan nodded. "It's not hard to find. Let's go in. Let me see what kind of mysteries that world has first." Hearing this, the Een God cult leader hurriedly nodded. "That's right. I'll immediately remove the restriction." As he said this, he did not dare to hesitate. His hands moved, and strange runes appeared around his body. They slowly condensed and swam around his body. The number of these runes increased, and they became more and more complicated. Gradually, they formed a long river of runes. There was even a faint sound of water flowing from those runes. Chapter 12:57. Suddenly, the long river of runes trembled slightly, and its tail rose up. Like a divine dragon, it suddenly charged forward like a vortex that was faintly glowing within the natural formation formed by the 108 stars. Its speed was so fast that it seemed to surpass time. It appeared in front of the vortex in the blink of an eye and poured into it. As the river of runes poured in, the entire natural formation paused for a moment. The countless vortexes that were constantly changing seemed to have suddenly stabilized. The faintly glowing vortexes that were about to jump out of their original positions seemed to have been engraved in the void during this process, and there were no signs of them moving. Then, an intense brilliance rushed out of the vortex. This brilliance was extremely real and condensed. It even faintly revealed a strange scene of the world. Of course, the scene was extremely blurry and illusory. It disappeared completely in an instant. Then, the vortex turned into a strange entrance. It was filled with all sorts of strange colors and looked extremely mottled. It gave off an aura that was different from the aura of the demon world. Luo Fan looked at the Een God sect leader's actions and only smiled faintly. Although this kind of restriction method was exquisite in his opinion, it was just SOSO. There were not many mysteries that could catch his attention. Naturally, he would not praise this kind of restriction method. "Fortunately, I did not disappoint you. This passage leads to that world." The Een God sect leader heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that the passage had stabilized. He smiled at Luo Fan. "It seems that there are no mistakes. Let's go then." Luo Fan smiled faintly. As he said that, he lifted his feet and stepped into the vortex together with the Een God sect leader. This vortex was formed by the extreme distortion of time and space. There was no specific time or space within it at all. Hence, when one stepped into it, one would be unable to move. Therefore, the flow of time that one could feel was only the flow of time on one's body. It was not the true flow of time. In Luo Fan's mind, it seemed as if several years had passed. He finally broke through the long space-time tunnel. With a soft chi sound, his figure had already entered another world, a world that surprised Luo Fan quite a bit. In this world, although it was not as vast as the demon realm, it was still extremely shocking. For ordinary cultivators, it was a vast expanse that they would not be able to explore in their entire life. And in this world, the concentration of Yuan Qi was naturally not as high as that of the demon realm, but overall, it was still extremely rich. Apart from this essence Qi, the space-time structure of the entire world was different. Compared to the demon world, it was extremely stable. It wasn't much different. What surprised Luo Fan even more was that although the rules of law of this world did not completely integrate with the Great Tao, which was different from the demon realm, compared to the other worlds that Luo Fan had experienced, the rules of law of this world were closer to the Great Tao. There were already faint signs of integration. The state of the rules of law of this world made the rules of law of this world more complicated and stable than the demon realm, but it was much stronger than other world. In other words, if there were cultivators in this world, they would be the cultivators that were most similar to the cultivators in the demon realm among the many foreign worlds. No wonder they have to focus on this world. After knowing the wonders of this world, Luo Fan also understood why the Een God sect had to focus on this world to integrate their half-step pseudo-holy treasure, and not choose a random world to integrate their half-step pseudo-holy treasure. At this moment, a powerful will suddenly swept across the void where Luo Fan was. This will was so powerful that it broke through the boundary between formless and tangible, turning into a kind of blue, wave-like existence. As it swept across this area, it was like a kind of blue water wave washing across this area. Even the rules of law, time, and space were inexplicably distorted because of the existence of this will that had condensed into a substance. It naturally formed an indescribable restraint, affecting all areas that were swept by this will. So it's an extraterrestrial demon. Such a voice came from this will, like countless thunder roaring in the world, causing the area within a radius of tens of thousands of miles to be almost silent. The will did not discover the existence of Luo Fan, but it discovered the Een God sect master, who had just walked out of the space-time channel not far away from Luo Fan. This person is the pseudo-holy master of this world. Back then, several generations of my ancestors had suffered a lot from him. In fact, 3 ancestors were seriously injured and died because of him. The Een God sect master said with extreme shame. The moment Luo Fan came into contact with this will, he analyzed the level of the owner of this will. The owner of this will was a powerful cultivator. His cultivation realm had indeed broken through the sage-to-be realm and set foot on the 9 steps below the sage realm. In other words, the owner of this will was indeed a pseudo-holy master. Moreover, compared to the rough estimation of the Een God sect master, Luo Fan clearly knew that the specific realm of this person had set foot on the 3 steps below the sage realm. In other words, he was an extremely powerful person who could easily kill a level 1 pseudo-holy master with a casual attack. A rank 3 pseudo-saint realm existence. It's really lucky for the ancestors of your sect to be able to escape from such an existence. Luo Fan said with a faint smile. What? This person has already become a level 3 pseudo-holy master? When the Een God sect master heard Luo Fan's words, his reaction was unexpectedly huge, and he lost his composure. When Luo Fan heard this, a faint smile appeared on his face as he said, I'm confident that I won't be wrong about this. How can this be? How can this be? How can this person improve so quickly? Although the ancestors of our sect can't determine the specific realm of this person, when our ancestors first met this person, he was only a half-step pseudo-holy master. According to the time, no matter how fast he progressed, he could at most become a level 1 pseudo-holy master. No matter how fast he would at most become a level 1 pseudo-saint. How could he become a level 3 pseudo-saint directly? What should we do? The God sect master looked rather frightened at this moment. You know that I've already discovered you, but you still dare to speak so confidently here. It seems that the other unfamiliar heavenly demon is your trump card. At this moment, a leisurely voice came into the ears of Luo Fan and the God sect master. The God sect master was horrified. He looked up abruptly and found that not far away, an old man who looked like an old farmer appeared in front of him. The old farmer looked ordinary no matter how one looked at him, but a will so powerful that it surpassed the boundaries of reality and illusion kept spreading out from his body. It expanded and contracted in the air, constantly showing off its earth-shattering terror. Luo Fan was not surprised by the appearance of this person. Although this person was a level 3 pseudo-holy master, compared to ordinary half-step pseudo-holy masters, he was already unimaginably powerful and could easily crush them. But for him, even if he was not a half-step pseudo-holy master and had not even reached the exceptional Tao master, he was confident that he could protect himself against such an existence. Now, he was a half-step pseudo-holy master. Moreover, because he was still in this flawless state, this world was forming a strange combination with him at a very fast speed, so that his authority in this world was constantly rising. His power in this world was gradually exceeding his own cultivation realm. In this way, his advantage over this level 3 pseudo-holy master. He would only be stronger than before. Under such circumstances, how could he not notice this person appearing so carelessly? The state of being flawless and unhindered was a state that Luo Fan had comprehended based on his understanding of the way of the sage. This state not only brought great benefits to his own realm and allowed him to reach an almost perfect state, but also had many effects on the outside world. For example, by looking at his body, listening to his voice, and sensing his aura, other creatures could condense the corresponding realm in the depths of their souls. His imprint was one of them. In addition, this state could gradually form a strange connection with the world where he was. In the end, his authority in that world became greater and greater, and his power in that world became more and more terrifying. If he was able to utilize it perfectly, then this effect could even allow him to be omniscient, and omnipotent in the world. He would practically be like a saint. This was the other effect. Among the above two effects, the first effect was a hindrance to Luo Fan most of the time. However, the second effect was almost always beneficial to him. Moreover, it was an extremely huge and unimaginable benefit. It was because of this second effect that he was able to live comfortably under the threat of the level 9 and level 8 pseudo-holy masters until now. However, the second effect was not limitless. In fact, the second effect's limitation could be said to be quite huge. The degree of perfection of the second effect was affected by Luo Fan's cultivation realm. The unblemished and unobstructed was not a level of cultivation, but a state. It was a state where everything one had learned from cultivation had been perfectly integrated into one's body, and then everything within one's body had been perfectly unified. In other words, any cultivation realm, even if one had just stepped onto the path of cultivation and had not achieved the immortal path, could achieve this state if they had the awareness. However, that was the flawless state before achieving the immortal path. In this way, when Luo Fan was still in the exceptional Tao Master realm, he could have the flawless state of the exceptional Tao Master realm. When he was in the half-step Holy Master realm, he could have the flawless state of the half-step Holy Master realm. In the future, if he reached the level 1 pseudo-Holy Master realm, level 2 pseudo-Holy Master realm, and so on, he could also have the flawless state of the corresponding realm. The flawless state, which allowed one to have a strange connection with heaven and earth and obtain all kinds of incredible power, was limited by the cultivation realm. At this moment, Luo Fan's flawless state of the half-step Holy Master realm, this strange connection with heaven and earth could only be limited to those in the boundless world and those below it. When the level of the world surpassed the level of the great thousand realms, this effect would no longer be effective. It was like the demon realm and the earth universe, although Luo Fan could enter any boundless world now. For example, the 5 worlds that he entered with the master of Wuhan Monastery, the world that he entered with Xianwen, as well as the world that he entered with the master of Yin God Church. He could obtain the absolute authority of that world in a short period of time. In these worlds, he had the power of a sage. However, in the demon realm and the earth universe, no matter how long he stayed, this strange connection with heaven and earth would not work. It was impossible for him to obtain the incredible authority of the boundless world and have the power of a sage. He could only wait until his cultivation realm continued to improve and finally rose to an incredible height. Only then would he be able to have the power of a sage in the demon realm and the earth universe. However, it was not something that Luo Fan could predict at the moment, to what extent he would have to raise his cultivation realm. Perhaps it would be possible to reach the level 9 pseudo-Holy Master realm, or perhaps it would be possible to become a sage. Who could be sure? The effect of this flawless state could not be understood by those who did not have such a state. Just like the venerated god. Even the 2 level 9 pseudo-Holy Masters like Lu Xun could not find the reason why Luo Fan was so powerful in that world, let alone the cultivators whose cultivation realm was lower than theirs. This old farmer was an ordinary level 3 pseudo-Holy Master. Although he was somewhat special in this world, his knowledge could not surpass that of the venerated god and Lu Xun. Therefore, he did not know. The longer Luo Fan stayed here, the more powerful he would become. At this moment, he looked at the 2 of them leisurely. With a slight thought, he continuously used various methods to seal spacetime. Gradually, the spacetime within a radius of hundreds of millions of miles was forged as if it was made of fine diamonds. Even the master of Yin God Church felt that it was extremely difficult for him to distort the void. He also felt as if his connection with the starry sky of the demon realm had been completely cut off. The master of Yin God Church was terrified. However, when he saw the calm expression on Luo Fan's face, he felt some hope. He forced himself to remain calm and said, "You will soon know what we are relying on. As for who is the Tao and who is the demon, this is relative. To you, we are the demon. To us, aren't you the demon too? Interesting, interesting. You're about to die, yet you still have the mood to talk to us about the difference between Tao and demon. How could your sect elders, who were terrified like stray dogs, hand over their sect to someone like you?" The old farmer saw that he had completely sealed spacetime and thought that everything was under his control, but he sneered. Luo Fan floated quietly in the air. He did not pay attention to the conversation between the master of Yin God Church and the old farmer cultivator. He only carefully sensed the world. This world was of an extremely high level, and there were countless living beings in it. Among these voices, there were also a large number of cultivators. Among these cultivators, there were countless demi-sage cultivators. Among them, there were even dozens of half-step pseudo-sage cultivators. Among them, the only one who had truly stepped into the pseudo-sage stage was the old farmer cultivator in front of him. The place where the master of Yin God Church and Luo Fan appeared was at the edge of the sea near the southeast of this world. It was extremely far from the center of this world, which was the vast land. That place was extremely well hidden. If it was not for the fact that the level 3 pseudo-sage cultivator seemed to have a special status in this world, it would have been impossible for him to discover the arrival of Luo Fan and the master of Een God Church so quickly. It was precisely because the level 3 pseudo-sage cultivator had a special status in this world that he discovered the two of them and rushed over. Therefore, the other dozen half-step pseudo-sage cultivators only discovered the abnormality here when the level 3 pseudo-sage cultivator sealed spacetime without any scruples. Just now, at this moment, from all over the world, they were rushing towards where Luo Fan and the Dark God cult leader were. Just as the master of Een God Church had said, this world was a foreign world to Luo Fan and the others, and the living beings here could be said to be extraterrestrial demons. To the living beings of this world, Luo Fan and the master of Een God Church were invaders from the foreign world, so they were naturally extraterrestrial demons of this world. Evidently, all the living beings in this world were extremely repulsed by the extraterrestrial demons, and viewed them as public enemies. This was the only reason why the level 3 pseudo-sage cultivator would instantly rush over after sensing their arrival and seal spacetime so that they could not escape. Only then would the other dozen half-step pseudo-sage cultivators put down what they were doing and rush over as soon as possible. Half-step pseudo-sage cultivators were already extremely powerful. Although this world was vast, it would only take them a short period of time to cross the entire world. Just as the level 3 pseudo-sage cultivator and the master of Een God Church spoke a few more sentences, the dozen half-step pseudo-sage cultivators had already appeared not far away. They formed a circle and surrounded Luo Fan and the master of Een God Church. The master of Een God Church spoke nonsense because Luo Fan did not say anything, so he could only speak to stall for time. The reason why the level 3 pseudo-sage cultivator spoke so leisurely was also to stall for time and wait for the arrival of these half-step pseudo-sages. Chapter 1258. Luo Fan's words made the Een God cult master, who had already given up all hope, feel both incredulous and overjoyed. Didn't that mean that the senior in front of them was still confident that he could defeat so many half-step pseudo-sage cultivators and even a level 3 pseudo-sage cultivator who was eyeing him covetously? Did that mean that he could easily defeat them and refine this entire world? Is that really the case? That's great. Since that's the case, I'll give you the reward for this transaction first, the Een God cult master said hurriedly. As he spoke, he waved his hand and a ring appeared in his hand. It looked like it was born naturally, but it exuded an indescribable aura. This was the item that the Een God cult master and Luo Fan had agreed to exchange for. As soon as Luo Fan saw the ring, a faint smile appeared on his face. He raised his hand and gently beckoned. The ring floated and slowly floated towards him. His actions were so unscrupulous that the half-step pseudo-sage cultivators and the level 3 pseudo-sage cultivator nearby were all dumbfounded. How dare you be so arrogant? If I don't teach you a lesson, you'll think that we're made of paper. The level 3 pseudo-sage cultivator gritted his teeth and said. As he spoke, he raised his hand and grabbed at the ring. This grab instantly triggered the terrifying divine might of the entire world. Even the space-time that had been completely sealed started to change drastically. Time, space, rules, and nomological laws were all distorted. It looked like an invisible giant hand had appeared out of thin air around the naturally formed ring. It was as if it was holding that hand in the palm of its hand. At this moment, the ring suddenly shook slightly. Then, the various rules, laws, time, space, and other existences distorted and formed a giant hand that could completely destroy a world in any other location. But now it was instantly dispersed. The way the ring floated was not affected at all. It slowly floated in front of Luo Fan and was gently taken off by Luo Fan. The level 3 pseudo-sage cultivator's expression was extremely ugly at this moment. Although he had paid some attention to the seemingly unfathomable Luo Fan, he never thought that Luo Fan would be a threat or that he would be at a disadvantage against Luo Fan. Because of this, he didn't care about what happened to Luo Fan at all. He just let Luo Fan stand there in a daze. However, at this moment, right before his eyes, he discovered that Luo Fan was much more powerful and terrifying than he had imagined. One had to know that he had done a great service to the world. In this world, the power he possessed was one level higher than the average cultivation realm. In other words, under normal circumstances, cultivators who had reached the 4th step and achieved the 4th grade pseudo-sacred realm were no match for him. That was the case. The person in front of him had attacked so casually, yet he didn't even have the ability to slow down. How fearsome, how terrifying was this? It's a good deal this time. Luo Fan didn't care how frightened the level 3 pseudo-sage cultivator and the surrounding half-step pseudo-sage cultivators were. Instead, he quietly stroked the ring that was born naturally with a satisfied smile on his face. This was a ring. It was born naturally in the demon realm. The power it contained was not strong, but it contained some great Tao that belonged to the demon realm. In other words, it actually intercepted a part of the great Tao of the demon realm and sealed it inside the ring. If Luo Fan wanted it, he could even refine this ring into a pseudo-sage treasure that was more powerful than other pseudo-sage treasures in the demon realm. It was a genuine pseudo-sage treasure without any discount at all, helping the God Sex leader complete the last step of refining a half-step pseudo-sage treasure into a real pseudo-sage treasure in exchange for a natural material that could become a pseudo-sage treasure with a little sacrificial refining was not a bad choice, no matter how one looked at it. Although Luo Fan did not intend to advance his cultivation realm with the help of a half-step pseudo-sage treasure, it did not mean that he was against pseudo-sage treasures. After all, they could greatly enhance one's strength. In the demon realm, that was not peaceful, the more the better. When the God cult leader heard Luo Fan's murmur, his face was filled with curiosity and joy, but there was also an inexplicable sense of regret on his face. He was curious about the power of this ring that was formed naturally to make this senior think that it was worth it to go against all the cultivators in the world. He was happy because since this senior was satisfied with this ring, it meant that this senior would at least try his best to complete this transaction, which greatly increased his safety. On the other hand, he was regretful about the value of this treasure. The value of this treasure was so great, but he had to use it in exchange for this senior's help. This was very likely to mean that he might have made a loss in this transaction. How could he not feel inexplicable regret? However, these thoughts were quickly extinguished by him. No matter if it was curiosity, joy, or regret, all of this had already become a foregone conclusion, and it had nothing to do with him any longer. The emergence of these various emotions would only add to his sorrow, so what meaning was there to them? My name is Nongyu, how should I address you? The old farmer-like level 3 pseudo-sage looked at Luo Fan and said. Luo Fan put the naturally formed ring into his sleeve and said with a smile, My name is Luo Fan, and I come from a world that you can't imagine. This time, I'm here to fulfill this fellow Taoist's request, which is to completely refine this world and hand it over to this fellow Taoist. Therefore, although I have no enmity with you, I'm sorry. Refine this world. Nong Yu's expression changed drastically when he heard this. As his eyes widened, a monstrous killing intent rushed out of his body and crushed towards Luo Fan. This killing intent was so strong that the entire world trembled slightly. In an instant, it caused a subtle change in the law layer. An inexplicable sense of rejection appeared on Luo Fan and the God cult leader. It was as if the entire world was rejecting the two of them. You really are an extraterrestrial demon. How can you be so deranged? Nong Yu's killing intent surged to the heavens. Nong Yu said coldly. His voice seemed to come from the depths of the 9 hells. It contained all kinds of terrifying power. If an ordinary person heard this voice, there was no need for him to use any killing intent, nor did he need to use any methods. Just the power of the voice itself was enough to completely break the body of an ordinary person, instantly exploding and dying. Such a voice had established a strange connection with the entire world. It was almost omnipotent in this world. For the omniscient and omniscient Luo Fan, this was naturally nothing. However, for the God cult leader beside him, it felt as if he had turned into an ordinary person and been thrown naked into a world of ice and snow. It was truly bone-chilling and extremely uncomfortable, except for the God cult leader. The other pseudo-sage half-step sages, who were shocked and enraged by what Luo Fan had said, also felt their bodies turn cold at the same time. It was as if they would be torn apart in the next moment, their souls would scatter and their bodies would vanish. Perhaps. Luo Fan just shook his head lightly. He said this. As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed at the pseudo-sage level 3. In an instant, the level 3 pseudo-sage felt a terrifying sense of danger looming over him. This kind of danger was something he had never felt since he became the strongest expert in the world many years ago. Now that it had appeared again, his reaction was unimaginably huge. He raised his hand and pointed. In an instant, a mirror appeared out of thin air in front of him. This mirror was in the shape of a bronze mirror. It looked as if it had been buried in the ground for thousands of years before being dug out. The entire mirror looked rusty, and even more than half of the mirror's surface was covered by green rust. It was hard to believe that this mirror still had its original function. After this mirror appeared, there was a sudden soft bang. The mirror suddenly trembled violently, and strange crackling sounds came from inside. It sounded as if many parts of the mirror had exploded under the impact and lost their function. Seeing this, the old farmer Nong Yu shouted and raised his hand to slap the mirror. The vast power in his body frantically poured into the mirror. As the power poured in, the mirror began to emit a strong blue light. Countless cracks appeared in the blue light, and as the light became stronger, the cracks gradually closed. At this moment, the dozen half-step pseudo-sage experts around him had also reacted. They each took out their own magic treasures and launched various powerful spells at Luo Fan. They are just magic treasures at the peak of the sage-to-be level. What power do they have? The God cult master looked at the magic treasures of the half-step pseudo-sage experts and could not help but feel disdain. That's right. Although the cultivation realm of these half-step pseudo-sage experts had reached the same level as him, the magic treasures they used were not equal to their status and cultivation realm. The magic treasures of these half-step pseudo-sage experts were only at the peak of the sage-to-be level. Such an existence, not to mention Luo Fan, even he could kill 100 or 200 of them with a single slap. Although the difference between a half-step pseudo-sage treasure and a magic treasure at the peak of the sage-to-be level seemed to be only half a level, the difference between them was extremely huge. After all, a half-step pseudo-sage treasure was already at the edge of the sage-to-be level, but it was also at the edge of the law of cause and effect. If any attack was not offset by the law of cause and effect of the same level, the process could be completely ignored and the effect could be directly produced in a way that could completely disintegrate the opposing force. In the end, it would almost certainly achieve its goal. That was to say, unless it was a heaven-defying existence like Luo Fan, even a peak sage-to-be existence and a peak sage-to-be level magic treasure would not be able to launch any attack from the half-step pseudo-holy treasure. No matter in which direction or how the attack was launched, as long as the owner of the half-step pseudo-holy treasure wanted to destroy the existence, the attack would definitely penetrate through the weakness of the existence and naturally work in the way that had the highest chance of success. Under such circumstances, the half-step false holy artifact that possessed a half-step false holy artifact could casually activate the half-step false holy artifact. It was possible to defeat a half-step pseudo-sage expert without a half-step pseudo-sage treasure. Of course, the God cult master was just disdainful. At this moment, he did not dare to participate in the battle between Luo Fan and the cultivator in the original body of this world. No matter whether he had good intentions or not, no matter whether he wanted to help or not, He was not sure if his actions would destroy the plan of this unfathomable senior in front of him. As a powerful cultivator who had controlled a sect like the God cult for hundreds of millions of years, he had seen many good intentions causing trouble. It turned out that he was right to be cautious. Luo Fan, who was not far away from him, raised his hand and gently pointed at the half-step pseudo-sage expert. In an instant, those half-step pseudo-sage experts suddenly stopped in the air. The magic treasures at the peak of the sage-to-be level that they had taken out also exploded in an instant. All the power contained in them and all the materials contained in them gradually entered the world in an extremely tame and mysterious way. After a while, they gradually integrated into the world in a way that did not produce the terrifying explosion that they should have, and eventually disappeared without a trace. No! The half-step pseudo-sage experts all felt an indescribable terror shrouding them at this moment. This terror made them not even care about the destruction of their magic treasures, and they let out such a roar. After this roar, they could not roar anymore no matter how hard they tried. What happened next not only made the level 3 pseudo-sage experts widen their eyes, but also the God cult master's scalp went numb, and an inexplicable shock flashed in his eyes. They saw. The half-step pseudo-sage experts seemed to be made of different colored powder. Specks of strange powder gradually drifted out of their bodies. They gradually melted into the void. In just a short while, all the half-step pseudo-sage experts, who were absolutely powerful anywhere, were completely turned into powder. They were completely swallowed by the void and disappeared without a trace. It was as if these half-step pseudo-sage experts had never appeared in this world. They were half-step pseudo-sage experts. The God cult master's heart skipped a beat. He looked at Luo Fan as if he was looking at a monster. Those people were half-step pseudo-sage experts, and so was he. At this moment, in just a short while, these half-step pseudo-sage experts had been turned into powder and disappeared without a trace. Not even their corpses were left. Didn't that mean that if Luo Fan wanted to, he only needed to move his mind, and in a short period of time, he could also turn his entire body into powder and completely erase his existence? At the thought of this, his scalp went numb. You actually dared to kill them? Nong Yu's eyes were already bleeding, and the surface of his body was covered with countless fine cracks. Blood kept seeping out of these cracks, turning into intense blood flames that wrapped around him. That murderous intent was so strong that it had completely changed the entire world. It turned the originally completely sealed spacetime into extreme darkness, and gusts of chilly wind were generated out of thin air, directly freezing the boundless sea below and turning it into an extremely vast ice surface. These half-step pseudo-sage experts were all cultivated by him from scratch. To him, every single one of them was like a son or nephew. The future of the entire world was completely entrusted to them. However, just now, right in front of him, they were turned into flying ashes one by one, and all traces of their existence were erased. This was simply cutting off all his hope. How could he remain calm? How could he not be furious? At this moment, he was engulfed by the blood flames and his eyes were bleeding. He didn't look like a simple and honest old farmer anymore. At this moment, he looked like the legendary Blood Azura who lived by killing. He was filled with endless terror, endless murderous intent, and endless oppression. As he changed, the appearance of the bronze mirror that was emitting blue light in his hand also changed in an instant. An extremely dense, pure and violent blood-red light replaced the blue light and emitted from the copper mirror. The original rust on the bronze mirror looked like sticky blood stains, emitting monstrous malice. It almost turned the surrounding spacetime into a blood prison. It reflected the chilly wind in the surroundings, the sea that had turned into ice below, and the sky that was shrouded by dark clouds. It looked extremely terrifying. As expected, it is not an ordinary magic treasure. When Luo Fan saw the changes in front of him, he couldn't help but show a faint smile on his face. This mirror was a level 3 pseudo-sage treasure. He already knew this the moment it appeared. Even if Luo Fan was almost omnipotent, omniscient, and omniscient in this world, it was still impossible for him to break this mirror so easily. After all, as a level 3 pseudo-sage treasure, its essence had already surpassed the limits of a world. It was not a problem to destroy it with the power of a world, but it was impossible to compress the destruction into an instant. However, the fact that this magic treasure was destroyed in an instant made him suspect that the power of this magic treasure had not been fully exerted. He suspected that this magic treasure had deeper mysteries that had not been revealed yet. Chapter 1259. As the bloody light soared into the sky, Luo Fan faintly felt as if the miraculous connection between him and this world had been cut off. Although he could still obtain unimaginable abilities and indescribable power here, there was a huge difference compared to his previous state of being an omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipotent saint. Luo Fan could not help but frown when he sensed this change. It turns out that this state isn't absolutely invincible. Other cultivators with extraordinary authority in this world, if they were to advance to a certain realm, they would be able to cause an impact on this state. Luo Fan thought to himself, then raised his hand and gently pressed towards Nong Yu's location. In the blink of an eye, the copper mirror in front of Nong Yu, which was emitting boundless blood-red light and had almost turned the world into a bloody hell, shook slightly. The blood-red light on it suddenly became sluggish, as if it was about to dissipate. But in the next moment, the copper mirror shook violently, and the blood-red light on its surface suddenly burst forth. The intense light in the void was like a ferocious beast roaring crazily, stretching and shrinking, ready to pounce forward at any time and completely annihilate everything in its way. Kill! Nong Yu's killing intent soared as he roared. Following this roar, two huge blood-red palms suddenly stretched out from the blood-red copper mirror and slapped towards Luo Fan and the Dark God Sect's leader as if he was swatting flies. The instant the two blood-colored palms slammed down, the entire world seemed to freeze. At this moment, it seemed as if all the power in the entire world had condensed. The law layer, time, space, everything changed at this moment, becoming completely targeted at Luo Fan and the Een God cult leader. It used everything possible to destroy the two's ability to resist, and used everything possible to restrict the two's movements. When the Dark God cult leader saw this, he felt like he was being locked in midair. Whether it was his own body, or was it his own strength, or even his own thoughts, that seemed to have been fixed in place, even the slightest tremble. They couldn't do it. There was simply no way to block the terrifying danger brought about by the two palms, because their thoughts were already fixed. He didn't even have time to feel fear, only a strong sense of danger enveloped him. This sense of danger. This was the greatest threat to his life. His existence would be completely erased in the next instant, a strong sense of crisis. In contrast, Luo Fan did not have the extremely embarrassing performance of the Een God cult leader. The feeling that the entire world was oppressing him, rejecting him, and disintegrating all of his resistance had just descended upon him when it naturally shifted away. It was like a spring breeze caressing his face, only giving him a cool feeling and not really having any effect at all. After all, he had an extremely miraculous connection with this world. At this moment, although this connection had been greatly obstructed because of Nong Yu, it had not been cut off yet. Under such circumstances, the effect of using the power of the world to deal with him would be greatly reduced. Therefore, this situation had occurred. The terrifying effect that was enough to make the Een Shen sect leader unable to even think was like a spring breeze caressing his face to Luo Fan. With a slight thought, Luo Fan gently pulled the Een Shen sect leader and took a step forward. His figure had already traversed through time and space in an indescribable way and appeared in front of Nong Yu, right in between the mirror and Nong Yu. He had directly escaped the encirclement of the two palms. Under normal circumstances, Nong Yu was a level 3 pseudo-sage. His control over his own power was so strong that it was beyond the imagination of all living beings. As long as he released any power, even if it was for a trillionth of a second, he would be able to completely stop it. There would not be a situation where he would hit nothing and accidentally injure others. However, at this moment, Nong Yu's rationality had already been overshadowed by anger and killing intent. Therefore, after Luo Fan dodged the two palms and appeared in front of the mirror, Nong Yu was unable to adjust the direction of the two palms at all. The two palms slammed together without any reservation, as if Luo Fan and the Yinshen sect leader were still in their original positions. This slap was truly like the collapse of the world and the destruction of the universe. The powerful impact directly tore apart a large part of the world, causing the area where the palm was to begin to expand in a fan-shaped direction towards the edge of the world. Space-time collapsed, the laws were completely destroyed, and even all yuan qi and all matter were completely annihilated, completely vanishing. This state of chaos was beyond imagination. It was also a great harm to the entire world. After this destruction, the entire world shook violently. There was even a faint feeling of pain from the source of the world and the will of the world, causing all living beings in the world to be shrouded in an indescribable pain. Even though Nong Yu had tried his best to control the direction of the destruction away from the blood-colored copper mirror and Nong Yu, some of the aftermath still broke through his control and directly spread in this direction. It affected the copper mirror, Nong Yu, and even Luo Fan and the Yinshen sect leader, who had appeared in this direction at this moment. In that instant, the spacetime within a radius of an unknown number of millions of miles in that direction began to ripple. Many cracks also appeared in the law layer due to the aftermath of the ripples. Because of these cracks, the area within a range of billions of miles seemed to have become billions of layers of spacetime. All matter and existences within it were completely separated and distributed among these billions of layers of spacetime. This kind of change was definitely not a pleasant thing for any living being. If that living being was just an ordinary living being, this kind of change was enough to completely erase it and make it impossible for it to exist again. Even if that living being's cultivation was relatively strong and could resist it, it would not feel good. It was impossible for it to be completely unharmed. This was what the Yinshen sect leader was feeling right now. If he had been prepared and used his own power to resist, he naturally would not have been injured. However, his thoughts had just been completely sealed and he had just regained his ability to think. How could he have had the time to mobilize his own power to resist? The moment these cracks appeared, countless cracks appeared on the Yinshen sect leader's body. It was as if these cracks were about to completely separate him. Every small fragment seemed to be completely thrown into one of the countless layers of spacetime. This kind of change made the Yinshen sect leader feel as if he was being cut into pieces. There was no time to think about anything else. The power around him fluctuated wildly and instantly protected his body. It directly became a body of its own. It completely dispelled the effects of the countless cracks on him. Following this change, the countless cracks on his body disappeared in an instant. However, after all, the damage had already been done. The moment the countless cracks completely disappeared, he suddenly spat out a large mouthful of blood, and his entire face became much paler. It took him a while to completely recover. Compared to the Yinshen sect leader, who had been injured by these cracks, Luo Fan was not affected at all. Just as mentioned before, although his body's strange connection with heaven and earth had been blocked, it had not completely disappeared. The changes in heaven and earth could not harm him at all. The moment the shock waves swept over, he only had to move his heart and the various destructive effects completely separated from his body. They could no longer affect him. He did not even need to change his expression to resist the effects of these countless cracks. Compared to Luo Fan, Nong Yu was not as relaxed as Luo Fan. Although Nong Yu did not vomit blood from the impact like the Yin God sect leader, she was not as relaxed as Luo Fan. Her complexion still changed to resist such an impact. Nong Yu had naturally expected that he would not be able to subdue Luo Fan with this attack. After all, the terrifying power that Luo Fan had shown before was not fake. Under such terrifying power, if someone said that Luo Fan could be easily dealt with and killed, he wouldn't believe it. However, even if he had expected that Luo Fan would not die under this move, he would never have expected that this move would not even harm him. He did not expect that Luo Fan would be able to dodge this attack so easily, this was for sure. If he had expected this, he would not have used this move. Luo Fan had no intention of waiting for him to continue attacking. He did not use the Divine Court Heavenly Cauldron either. Instead, he threw a punch and handed his fist over to the law of cause and effect. A very unreasonable trajectory flashed through the air and directly imprinted itself on Nong Yu's eyes. The power of this punch was unimaginably strong and contained supreme power. Even though Nong Yu was currently almost at the level of a level 5 pseudo-sage due to his anger and the support of the world, it was still difficult for him to resist. In an instant, Nong Yu's head exploded completely. The power of the punch was still constantly destroying Nong Yu's body. It was about to completely shatter his body and erase his existence. A broken head was not a serious injury for a cultivator. As long as one's cultivation realm could be raised to the immortal realm, even the most basic itinerant immortal realm, a broken head would not be fatal. Moreover, it was an existence whose cultivation realm had reached the level 3 pseudo-sage. For Nong Yu, a broken head was actually equivalent to a cut on an ordinary person's finger. However, just like how a cut on a finger could also be fatal due to infection, a broken head could also be fatal if it was not dealt with. Especially at this moment, the power of the punch that shattered Nong Yu's head was still on his body and was constantly destroying everything. In such a state, it was obvious that if Nong Yu did not deal with it, he would be completely erased in the next instant. At this moment, the blood-red light emitted by the blood-red copper mirror condensed and constructed a Nong Yu in a strange way that appeared under the copper mirror. The Nong Yu, whose head had exploded, instantly lost the ability to resist. He was completely crushed by the power of Luo Fan's punch and disappeared without a trace. This is the use of cause and effect. Luo Fan came to a sudden realization when he saw this. He could not help but smile inexplicably when he realized what kind of mysterious changes had taken place. He had fought against pseudo-sage existences many times. However, it was only at this very moment. Just now, he discovered the true unimaginable power of pseudo-sage existences on Nong Yu. It was the power of cause and effect. In the past, even the battle godchild, Wu Daozi, and Master Ashenmu had used absolute power and divine abilities. There were no beautiful transformations, they had returned to their natural state. They used pure power and divine abilities to crush everything. They didn't use any special karmic powers. Until this very moment. Only now did he truly feel it. The terrifying effect of cause and effect. The Nong Yu that was formed by the blood-red light was also the real Nong Yu. The Nong Yu that was shattered by his punch was also Nong Yu. The relationship between the two. It was extremely mysterious. It could even be said to be extremely strange. How did the transformation process allow Nong Yu to have two bodies? How did these two bodies suddenly transform out of thin air? It was all produced in a way that Luo Fan could not understand. It was very likely that even Nong Yu himself could not understand the specific transformation process. He simply wanted a certain result. He wanted to escape from the annihilation of Luo Fan's fist power, and at the same time, appear behind Luo Fan. Therefore, such a change had occurred. Normal development was the cause, the process, and the result. At this moment, the result would appear with the cause. There was no need to care about the process at all. This was the special use of cause and effect. It was also the special power of pseudo-sage existences. This power was obviously the deepening and expansion of the ability of a cultivator to see cause and effect before becoming a pseudo-sage. A cultivator would gradually gain the ability to see cause and effect after becoming a celestial being. Of course, this also required the coordination of the great Tao of a specific world. Some worlds were dominated by cause and effect. Cause and effect determined all the actions of a cultivator and even their fate. In such a world, the connection of cause and effect was extremely obvious. The threshold to be able to see cause and effect was lowered. One only needed to be an individual immortal to be able to see it clearly. However, in some worlds, cause and effect was still rather important, but it was not the main factor that affected the fate of a cultivator. In other words, cause and effect did not determine the root of everything. In such a world, the threshold for a cultivator to be able to see cause and effect would be raised. One might need to be an innate Grand Luo or even a demisage to be able to see it clearly. As for the Earth universe, it had always been between these two extremes from before the world was broken to the Dharma-ending age in the future. In other words, although cause and effect was not the main factor that absolutely determined the fate of a cultivator for the Earth universe, it still occupied a considerable share of the various factors that affected the fate of a cultivator. Especially in the Dharma-ending age in the future, this share was close to occupying the main position. Therefore, for the Earth universe, the cultivation realm needed to see cause and effect was not very high during the Dharma-ending age. One only needed to be at the Tai Pure Yang realm. Before the world was broken, one needed to be at the innate Grand Luo realm to see cause and effect clearly. Although the effect of seeing cause and effect was extremely important for a cultivator, because it was only a clear view, the cultivator could only go with the flow, or form cause and effect, or end cause and effect, or avoid cause and effect. If he wanted to use such a method to fight his enemy, he could forget about it. The above was all that a cultivator could do with the mysterious existence of cause and effect before becoming a pseudo-sage. Once a cultivator became a pseudo-sage, the ability to see cause and effect would naturally be deepened, expanded, and finally turned into the application of cause and effect, or in other words, the application of the law of cause and effect, directly defining the cause and effect, and naturally completing the process with the help of the law of cause and effect was one of the simplest application methods of the law of cause and effect. If this application method continued to improve, the next step would be to directly define the effect and let the law of cause and effect naturally complete the cause and process. Finally, if this ability was further improved, it would be able to reverse the cause and effect. In other words, for a pseudo-sage, there were 3 levels of the application of the law of cause and effect. The first level was the level that Luo Fan and Nong Yu were at this moment. By defining the cause and effect, the law of cause and effect would naturally complete the process of the process. The second level was a level higher. By directly defining the effect, the law of cause and effect would naturally complete the cause and process. For example, if the previous Nong Yu's use of karma had reached this level, he wouldn't even need to make a move. He wouldn't even need to use his magic weapon. The moment Luo Fan's fist landed on his head, his figure would directly disappear and reappear in another absolutely safe position. The whole process was completely beyond the scope of his and Luo Fan's understanding. It was almost like the work of a saint. The third level was to reverse cause and effect. For example, if Nong Yu's application of cause and effect had reached this level, Luo Fan's punch would not have hit him at all. The power of the punch would have directly acted on Luo Fan's body, directly exploding his head or even completely erasing him. Chapter 1260. However, it was not easy to improve the level of the law of causality. It was not because of the improvement of one's cultivation realm. At the very least, Luo Fan had seen the level 8 pseudo-sage Gong Guzi's use of causality. He should be at the first level, and had not even reached the second level, let alone the third level. Even the Jing Zun and Lu Zun did not seem to have raised their usage of the law of causality to the third level. Otherwise, even if Luo Fan was omnipotent and omniscient in the universe, it would have been difficult for him to escape from the battle with the Jing Zun's projection for such a long time, let alone repel the Jing Zun. Of course, there might be another possibility, which was that the price of using the law of causality at the third level was too high. Even the Jing Zun and Lu Zun were not willing to pay the price. Nong Yu naturally did not know that Luo Fan was deducing so many secrets about the special power of the pseudo-sage level. He was both furious and frightened. How is this possible? The strength you displayed is definitely not stronger than mine. How could you kill me so easily? Nong Yu was in disbelief. Although he could not clearly see what level Luo Fan's strength was, as a cultivator, as a powerful cultivator who had a special status in this world and received many blessings from the world, he could roughly sense whether Luo Fan was stronger or weaker than him. Because of this, he was certain. Luo Fan, who was in front of him, should not have been stronger than him. The characteristic that Yi Shiwen displayed at this moment was beyond his perception. It was only because his divine sense was rather special. Luo Fan smiled faintly and said, "How do you know that I'm not stronger than you? Perhaps what you feel is just what I want you to feel." "Impossible." Nong Yu frowned and shouted, "My senses are not that wrong." Without waiting for Luo Fan's reply, he raised his hand and pointed at the blood-colored bronze mirror above his head. A beam of blood-red light suddenly shot out of the copper mirror and turned into a strange creature with 1,000 heads, 10,000 hands, 36 wings, and 16 legs. The creature's eyes were filled with unimaginable cruelty, and its body was filled with killing intent. It was so strong that it had condensed into a solid substance. A killing intent that could not be described by color, or even described by liquid or solid, was abstracted around his body. After this strange creature appeared, the eyes on its 1,000 heads all released different kinds of light, and its 10,000 arms instantly formed trillions of hand seals. Under this handprint, the entire world seemed to tremble. Suddenly, from the depths of space-time, from the depths of the law layer, an intense blood-red light shone out. The blood-red light did not cause any damage to the world itself. Instead, it caused everything in the world to emit some kind of power from the depths of the world, strengthening the blood-red light. This caused the blood-red light to become even more intense and terrifying. It directly condensed toward the only two living beings in this world that did not belong to this world. This bloody light was extremely pure destruction. Luo Fan felt an indescribable danger from this bloody light. He had a feeling that if he were to be enveloped by this bloody light without any resistance, his entire existence would be melted away by this bloody light in the blink of an eye, and he would be erased. Even Luo Fan was in such a state, let alone the Yin God sect master, who was many times weaker than Luo Fan. At this moment, the fear in his heart was indescribable, and he did not dare to delay at all. With a flash, his body was replaced by a golden humanoid pseudo-sage treasure. Obviously, he knew in his heart that he could not resist it, and he did not dare to place all his hopes on Luo Fan. He directly drilled into the half-step pseudo-holy treasure and used the half-step pseudo-holy treasure that the Yin God sect had spent countless generations to refine to withstand the impact of these bloody lights, so that he could ensure his own safety. This kind of meticulous use is worth learning, Luo Fan thought to himself as he looked at the blood-red light and felt the danger it brought him. The power of this blood-red light was an attack formed by the combination of the power of Nong Yu's treasure and the power of the world. The way this attack worked was to condense the power of the world in an extremely subtle way, causing the power of the world itself to increase by a terrifying amount. In the end, it could even completely erase his existence. Luo Fan carefully experienced the use of this blood-red light. His body emitted an invisible force that directly enveloped the Yin God sect master and himself. Although the essence of this invisible force was extremely high, it could not completely resist the blood-red light. In the blood-red light, this force was constantly melting, causing the blood-red light to constantly approach the two of them. According to this trend, in another 10 breaths of time, this invisible force would be completely melted away, and the blood-red light would instantly pour all of its power towards Luo Fan and the Een God cult leader, which would result in all kinds of extremely tragic consequences. Although the sect leader of the Een God sect had the protection of the half-step pseudo-holy treasure, it was only a half-step pseudo-holy treasure after all. Under all the power of the level 3 pseudo-holy treasure and the terrifying power of this heaven and earth, it could only last a little longer than his body. If Luo Fan's power disappeared, what awaited him would definitely be completely destroyed after a short while. Facing this unimaginable crisis, the Een God sect master naturally had a premonition. At this moment, the fear in his heart was indescribable. If I had known this would happen, I would have waited outside. Why did I follow him in? At this moment, this was the only thought that flashed through the Een God sect master's mind. That kind of regret caused his expression to become extremely unsightly. Originally, he was still a sect master in the demon realm. Naturally, he was not considered much in the entire demon realm, and powerful cultivators could easily be found to annihilate him. However, in the war-torn mysterious ocean, he was still at the highest level. For hundreds of billions of years, there was no existence that could threaten his life at all, allowing him to enjoy being the strongest person in the area for such a long time. However, ever since he stepped into this world, he seemed to have become an ant. Almost every second, he felt that his life was under great threat. Every second, he needed Luo Fan's protection. If Luo Fan were to make a mistake at any time, he would die and his soul would scatter. This was a very tragic feeling for him. One could imagine how miserable it was for him to not curse now. He was only regretting in his heart. This was already very cultured of him. Of course, the invisible power that Luo Fan had unleashed was not to completely resist the blood-red light. Instead, it was only to delay it and give him some time to comprehend the mysteries of the blood-red light. Therefore, the invisible power was constantly being melted away. However, he did not care at all. He only focused on comprehending the mysteries of the blood-red light. After a few breaths, when the blood-red light had worn away most of the invisible power, Luo Fan finally found the key. A faint smile appeared on his face as he raised his hand and poked at the void. In an instant, the entire world changed in an instant. The great Tao of this world changed. All the rules, laws, time, and space underwent an extremely subtle change as he poked at the void. This subtle change did not have much of an impact on the world itself. It did not cause the world to become absurd. Everything, all power, and even the performance of the rules and laws remained the same as before. However, it was this slight change that caused the blood-red light that had erupted from the depths of the world to completely disappear. This blood-red light was a meticulous use of the power of the world. Although this meticulous use was mysterious and could erupt with incredible effects, it was like turning graphite into diamond and increasing the attack power of the world by countless times. However, it was precisely because this attack was so meticulous that it became extremely fragile. The attack itself was formed by the combination of countless mysterious changes of the rules and laws. Once these rules and laws underwent a subtle change, the originally perfect combination would no longer be perfect. This imperfection completely disintegrated the blood-red light, causing it to disappear in an instant. Nongyu was shocked when she saw this change. With a thought, the strange creature with thousands of heads and thousands of hands let out 1,000 earth-shattering roars. The powerful sound waves spread out in all directions, shaking the thick layer of ice below and causing it to explode. Countless tiny ice fragments splashed in all directions, turning into a cloud of smoke that rolled away. Then, as if it didn't need time, This strange creature with thousands of hands directly moved from its original position to the front of Luo Fan. Its 10,000 arms, 36 wings, and 16 feet were perfectly coordinated, directly bombarding Luo Fan with a close-range attack. The blood-red monster's attack seemed to have surpassed the limits of the martial way. Every move contained the first level of the law of causality. After it was unleashed, it allowed the law of causality to adjust the process. In the end, it was incomparably perfect. The many arms, legs, wings, and heads did not interfere with each other at all. Instead, they helped each other, complemented each other, and strengthened each other as they bombarded Luo Fan's body without reservation. Luo Fan knew that the attack would affect him the moment it was unleashed. With a thought, he did not dodge at all and allowed the numerous attacks to land on him. At this moment, everything that could be destroyed within this range was completely destroyed. Whatever rules and laws, whatever time and space, whatever matter and energy, even the great Tao, were completely destroyed at that moment. This kind of destruction even affected the strange creature with thousands of hands, causing it to explode and become a part of the chaos of absolute destruction. Although the Yin God sect's leader was not the main body of the attack, he was still affected by it. Even though his reaction speed was extremely fast and he quickly dodged and escaped from the range of the absolute chaos, just the aftermath alone had caused countless small cracks to appear on the body of the pseudo-sage treasure. It took a while for the cracks to completely heal under the replenishment of countless golden lights. However, at this moment, he was looking at the absolute chaos not far away in shock. His mind was filled with disbelief. Impossible! Even those terrifying attacks from before couldn't kill him. Although these punches and kicks are fierce, they can't even kill him. Although this kind of punching and kicking attack is fierce, it is obviously easier to dodge. How could he die? How is it possible for you to use such a technique at a time like this? At this moment, a voice rang out. Nong Yu's shocked voice reached his ears, filling his heart with an indescribable hope. He looked towards the source of the voice, only to see that Luo Fan, who had clearly been smashed to pieces by the monster with thousands of hands, was still standing in front of Nong Yu, completely unharmed. His appearance was no different from before. In other places, I naturally wouldn't be able to perfectly use the law of causality here. It's not a problem. At this moment, Luo Fan's eyes were extremely deep, as if there were countless profound mysteries flashing through them. Because of this, his voice seemed to be drifting from beyond the heavens. At this moment, he was experiencing the entire process of using the law of karma to escape that attack. In that instant, he felt as if his entire body had suddenly dispersed, turning into absolute nothingness. It was a state of absolute nothingness that was even more nothingness than the layer of nothingness beneath the layer of laws and rules. Then, this nothingness moved in a way that was so complex that even he could not completely grasp it, and directly shifted its position. Next, he felt a violent shock, and he broke out of that state of absolute nothingness. Not far in front of him, Nong Yu, who was a level 3 pseudo-sage, appeared. At the place where he was originally, a body that also belonged to him was completely destroyed. It disappeared into nothingness. The entire process was truly mysterious and mysterious. The principles contained in it were so profound that he even felt that it was not much inferior to the Tao of sages, even if it was not comparable to the Tao of sages. At the same time, after the process just now, he also understood. Fortunately, he could be omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipotent like a sage here. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to complete the process of using the law of karma just now. He might not be able to turn into absolute nothingness, or he might not be able to break out of nothingness at all. If that was the case, he might really die now. Although it was only at the first level of the law of causality, it was clearly an extremely high-level first-level method of using causality. Although it was still at the first level of the law of causality, It was clearly an extremely high-level first-level method of using causality. Although Luo Fan could already surpass the fact that he was a half-step pseudo-sage and used some of the law of karma, his cultivation realm was still limiting him. If he relied on his own strength, he would not be able to perfectly use the high-level first level of the law of karma. There was only one fundamental reason why he was able to do this, and that was the support of the world. How could Nong Yu know that there was such a complicated reason? After hearing what Luo Fan said, a hint of confusion flashed across his face. Could there be something special in this world that could allow someone who had not become a sage to use the law of karma so perfectly? Although Nong Yu was already a level 3 pseudo-sage, he had never left this world, and had never entered the demon realm or the earth. Therefore, not to mention Luo Fan, his knowledge was far inferior to that of the leader of the Een God Church, who was still a half-step pseudo-sage. Under such circumstances, Luo Fan could deduce the 3 levels of the law of karma by seeing how Nong Yu used the law of karma just now. However, even though Nong Yu could perfectly use the high-level first level of the law of karma in this world, he still did not know how to use the law of karma. He did not even know that there was a second level of the law of karma, let alone the third level. In this way, the strength that Luo Fan displayed at this time had already shocked him inexplicably. He had a feeling that his views had been completely overturned. For a moment, he was at a loss, not knowing what to say or what to do. With the help of this world, it seems that it is not enough to complete the third level of the law of karma, but it should not be a problem to complete the second level. Luo Fan did not pay much attention to Nong Yu at this time. Instead, he was thinking about what he could do in this world. It should not be impossible to use the third level of the law of karma, but the third level of the law of karma has great restrictions. It cannot be used on existences that have surpassed a certain level. Luo Fan sensed slightly and changed his previous assertion. The third level of the law of karma was to reverse karma. The most direct manifestation of this was that if someone launched a powerful attack against Luo Fan, once he used this third level of the law of karma, the attack would directly affect that person. In the end, whatever effect the attack could produce on Luo Fan would definitely be able to produce the same effect on that person. Of course, this was only the most direct and violent manifestation. There were other more complicated and more mysterious manifestations. There were countless of them, but there was no need to mention them. Because Luo Fan was omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipotent in this world, he could also use the third level of the law of causality. However, because of the restrictions of this world, this third level of the law of karma could not be used on powers that were too powerful. It could only be used on those that were weaker. This was the great restriction of the third level of the law of karma that Luo Fan had mentioned.